The door should have led to a supply closet. Instead, it opened into a room that smelled like antiseptic and blood. He stopped with one foot inside, hand still on the handle. The hospital lights buzzed above him. His shirt was damp from running. Sweat cooled too fast against his skin. Somewhere behind him, a cart clattered. Somewhere else, a monitor beeped too slowly. The woman on the bed was not supposed to be alone. She lay propped up at an angle, thin blanket pulled tight over her chest. Her face was pale, jaw clenched as if pain had nowhere left to go. One arm was hooked to an IV stand. The other was curled tight against her ribs. She was watching the door when it opened, watching him. She did not look surprised. She looked tired and irritated, like someone who expected better. He stepped back instinctively, already reaching to close the door. Then the monitor dipped. A sharp change. The sound cut through his chest. He froze. He was a single father. He had learned to measure risk fast, learned when to step in and when to disappear. Hospitals were places you followed rules. You stayed invisible. You did not make mistakes. This was a mistake. The woman's eyes tracked him. Sharp, alert, not helpless. Even like this, authority clung to her. It was in her posture, in the way she held his gaze, in the way she did not ask for help. Her breathing was shallow. Each inhale looked like work. He moved anyway, not toward her. Toward the wall, toward the call button he should have pressed the second the door opened. His fingers missed it the first time, trembled the second. When he hit it, nothing happened right away. The monitor dipped again. He swallowed. His legs ached from standing all day. His head throbbed from lack of sleep. He had promised his son he would be home by morning. The woman shifted. Pain crossed her face before she could stop it. Her jaw tightened harder. She did not cry out. Power imbalance hung in the room, thick and strange. She was clearly someone important. He was wearing worn shoes and a borrowed visitor badge. Reality had stripped both of them down to the same thing. Two people waiting to see what failed first. The door behind him stayed closed. No footsteps came. He stayed where he was. Not close enough to touch her. Not far enough to run. Cold air brushed his skin. The smell pressed in. The monitor kept counting. Stay until the end to see how it unfolds. The door swung open farther than he intended. The handle slipped from his hand, and the door eased back against the stopper with a muted thud. He stood half inside the room, half out, weight caught between a step forward and retreat. The light inside was harsher than the hallway. White, unforgiving. It flattened everything it touched. The bed was positioned too close to the wall. The curtain had been pulled back but not secured. A monitor glowed to the left, its numbers steady but low. The air smelled wrong metallic beneath antiseptic, the kind that clung to the back of the throat. He knew instantly he wasn't supposed to be there. His visitor badge hung crooked against his chest. The lanyard was frayed. He had borrowed it from the front desk because he hadn't slept enough to argue. He had been looking for a restroom, or a supply room, anything that wasn't another waiting area with chairs that dug into his spine. The woman on the bed was awake. Her head was turned slightly toward the door, chin lifted just enough to see him without effort. Her eyes were open, alert, focused. They didn't widen when she saw him. They narrowed. Not fear, assessment. She looked like someone used to rooms rearranging themselves around her. His first instinct was to apologize. His second was to disappear. He reached back for the door, fingers brushing the edge. Then the monitor dipped. Not an alarm. Not yet. Just a subtle drop. A soft, almost polite change in rhythm. His hand froze mid-air. He had learned to notice small changes. Years of watching a child breathe through fevers had trained his attention. He could hear the difference between sleep and struggle, between calm and the start of something worse. The woman's chest rose shallowly. Too shallow. Her mouth tightened as she exhaled, lips pressed thin. One hand lay rigid on top of the blanket, fingers curled inward like she was holding something invisible. She did not look at the monitor. She looked at him. The authority in her gaze hit him harder than the medical equipment. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was expectation, control, a silent demand that the situation align itself properly. He shifted his weight fully into the room despite himself. The door stayed open behind him. I. The word left his mouth before he could stop it. It sounded wrong in the space. Too loud. He closed his mouth again. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her breathing hitched. Just once. Barely noticeable. Her jaw tightened in response, muscle jumping beneath pale skin. Pain registered and was shut down immediately, like a system override. The monitor dipped again, lower this time. He looked at it now, then back at her. Then, at the wall. The call button was mounted near the bed, just out of her reach. He took 2 steps toward it, shoes squeaking faintly against the floor. His legs felt heavy, like he'd already been standing too long. He pressed the button. Nothing happened right away. No voice. No chime. Just the same soft beeping from the monitor, indifferent and steady. He pressed it again. Harder. Still nothing. His pulse picked up. He became acutely aware of his body sweat cooling along his back, the ache in his calves, the dull pressure behind his eyes. He had been awake since dawn. Maybe earlier. Time had blurred into one long stretch of fluorescent light and worry. The woman shifted slightly, a controlled movement that cost more than she wanted it to. Her breath caught again, longer this time. Her eyes flicked briefly to the monitor before returning to him. There was irritation there now. Not at him specifically, at the failure of the room to function correctly. She lifted her chin a fraction higher, as if correcting posture in a boardroom instead of a hospital bed. He stood still, hands hovering uselessly at his sides. He wasn't staff. He wasn't family. He had no authority here. No permission. And yet, he was the only one standing. The monitor let out a sharper sound. Not an alarm. A warning. The numbers slid again, slow and stubborn. He swallowed. His mind ran through options the way it always did when something went wrong. Call again. Find someone. Leave the room and get help. But leaving meant turning his back. It meant assuming she would be fine for the seconds it took. Seconds mattered. She exhaled through her nose, controlled but strained. Sweat had gathered at her temple now, catching the light. Her fingers tightened against the blanket, knuckles whitening. She still didn't ask for help. The power dynamic in the room felt wrong. He was the one standing, the one with working legs and air in his lungs. She was the one in control. He stepped closer to the bed without touching it. Close enough to see the fine tremor in her hand. Close enough to hear the change in her breathing. Close enough to feel the pressure of responsibility settle over his shoulders, heavy and uninvited. I pressed the button, he said quietly. More to mark the action than to inform her. Her eyes flicked to the wall, then back to him. A single, sharp nod. Approval or dismissal? He couldn't tell which. The monitor dipped again. This time, the sound lingered. He looked at the door. Still no footsteps. No voices. The hallway beyond was empty, frozen in its own routine. He stood there, heart hammering, aware that whatever happened next would belong to him, whether he wanted it or not. He did not touch her. That decision held for a long second, then another. He stood close enough to feel the heat coming off her body, but not close enough to cross the line that still existed in his head. The line that said this was not his place. That said stepping in could make things worse. The monitor answered for him. Another dip. This one sharper. The sound lingered longer than before. Her breathing changed again. Not a gasp. Not panic. Something more controlled and more frightening. She was rationing air. Her eyes closed briefly. When they opened, the authority was still there. But it was working harder to stay upright. He pressed the call button a third time. Held it this time. Counted under his breath without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. Still nothing. The silence around the bed felt intentional, like the room itself had decided to wait and see what he would do. He shifted his stance, planting his feet wider. His legs trembled faintly, a mix of fatigue and adrenaline. He hadn't eaten since early morning. Coffee sat sour in his stomach. He could feel his pulse in his neck. Okay, he said quietly. The word came out rougher than he intended. She did not open her eyes. Her fingers loosened slightly on the blanket, then tightened again. A small tremor ran through her arm. Pain leaked through the control in short, sharp bursts she couldn't fully contain anymore. He glanced at the IV line, followed it with his eyes to the bag. He didn't know what it was supposed to look like, but he knew when something looked wrong. The drip was slow, too slow. He leaned in closer, careful not to touch anything. His breath felt loud in his ears. "Can you hear me?" he asked. Her eyes opened again, focused on him immediately. She gave another small nod. Minimal movement. Efficient. Good. Conscious was good. The monitor dipped again. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. He became aware of the faint hum of electricity in the walls, the distant echo of a cart rolling somewhere far away. Too far. He made a decision he didn't fully acknowledge as one. He stepped to the side of the bed and pulled the curtain farther back, exposing the call panel fully. He pressed the emergency button this time, hard. A faint click. No response. His jaw tightened. "All right," he said. Not to her. To the room. All right. He reached for the intercom panel near the door. He hadn't noticed it at first. It blended into the wall. He leaned in, scanning for instructions. The text was small. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. He pressed the only button that looked like it would do something. Static crackled. Then nothing. He let out a slow breath through his nose, forcing himself not to rush. Panic would not help. He had learned that the hard way, kneeling on bathroom floors with a feverish child in his arms, counting breaths instead of letting his head spiral. He turned back to her. She was watching him closely now, not judging, measuring. Another dip. The monitor's rhythm faltered, then steadied at a lower number. Her lips parted. She drew in a shallow breath and held it a fraction too long before letting it go. A faint sound escaped her throat. Not a cry. A leak. His chest tightened. He leaned closer, lowering his voice without thinking. "I'm here," he said. It wasn't reassurance. It was a statement of fact. Something solid in a room that was failing her. Her eyes stayed on his. There was a question there now. Not spoken. Not allowed to be. How far would he go? He glanced at the IV again. He knew enough not to touch it. Enough to know that guessing could kill someone. But he also knew when waiting was worse. The monitor dipped again. This time the sound crossed into alarm territory. Soft, but unmistakable. Her jaw clenched hard. Her hand tightened around the blanket, knuckles straining white. Sweat slid down the side of her face now, catching in the hollow near her ear. She exhaled sharply through her nose, control cracking at the edges. "Don't," she said. The word was quiet. Hoarse. It cost her. He froze, hand hovering midair, nowhere near her but close enough to feel like it mattered. "Don't," she repeated, slower, firmer, authority asserting itself even as her body betrayed her. He nodded once. He respected boundaries. He lived by them. But he didn't step back. The alarm sound sharpened, louder now. The numbers dropped again. Her eyes closed tightly this time. Her breathing stuttered. The controls slipped for a second longer than before. That second decided it. He moved. Not recklessly. Not fast. He placed one hand on the rail of the bed to steady himself and leaned in close enough that she could hear him without effort. "I won't touch anything," he said, "but I'm not leaving." Her eyes opened again. Frustration flared. Fear followed it, quick and unwelcome. She swallowed hard, throat working. He reached for the door and stepped into the hallway, leaving it open. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He projected his voice the way he used to when calling across playgrounds. "Hello?" he called. "I need someone in here. Now." His voice echoed down the empty corridor. No answer. He turned back to her, pulse pounding. "I'm going to stay here," he said, calm but firm. "I'll keep calling." She stared at him for a long moment. The power struggle hung between them, fragile and strange. Then she exhaled slowly and closed her eyes again, conceding something without naming it. The monitor dipped once more. Footsteps finally sounded at the far end of the hall. Distant. Rushed. Relief hit him hard enough to make his knees feel weak. The door burst open moments later. A nurse rushed in, followed by another. Voices filled the room, sharp and efficient. Hands moved fast. The monitor was adjusted. The IV checked. Commands were issued and followed without pause. No one looked at him. No one asked who he was or why he was there. He stepped back automatically, retreating toward the wall, then the door. The room rearranged itself around the woman as if he had never existed. Authority returned to uniforms and clipboards. The woman caught his eye once over the shoulder of a nurse. Just once. Her expression was unreadable. Exhaustion, something else beneath it. Then she was gone behind the curtain. He stood there for a second longer, heart still racing, hands empty. Then a nurse gestured sharply toward the door without looking at him. He left the room quietly. The hallway swallowed him whole. The door closed behind him with a soft final sound. The hallway felt colder than it had a moment earlier. The air conditioning hummed steadily, indifferent to what had just happened inside the room. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floor, stretching his shadow out in front of him like it belonged to someone else. He stood there longer than necessary. His hands were still slightly raised, fingers curled as if they had forgotten what to do next. When he finally lowered them, his arms felt heavy. His shoulders ached, tension settling in now that there was nothing left to react to. The alarm from the room was gone, replaced by the muted sounds of medical routine. Voices, footsteps, the clatter of equipment. Life continuing at its usual pace. He took a slow breath and let it out carefully. No one came after him. That landed harder than he expected. He adjusted the visitor badge on his chest, straightening it out of habit. The plastic card felt flimsy now. Pointless. He was suddenly very aware of how out of place he looked. Creased shirt, scuffed shoes, eyes rimmed red from exhaustion. He leaned back against the wall opposite the door and waited. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for. An explanation, an acknowledgement, a nurse stepping out to ask what he'd done or why he'd stayed. Nothing happened. Time passed in uneven chunks. He could tell because his legs started to shake. Because the ache in his lower back sharpened. Because his breathing finally slowed enough for him to notice how fast it had been going. A gurney rolled past him. A doctor walked by without a glance. Someone laughed quietly at the end of the hall. The world had already absorbed the incident and moved on. The door to her room stayed closed. He replayed the moment over and over without meaning to. The way her eyes had tracked him. The way she'd said don't like it was an order she expected to be obeyed. The brief flicker of something unguarded when the alarm sharpened and control slipped. He wondered if he had overstepped. The thought tightened his chest. He had pressed buttons he didn't understand, raised his voice in a place that ran on procedure, inserted himself into a situation where mistakes carried weight, but the alternative turning away sat worse. He pushed himself off the wall and took a step toward the nurse's station at the end of the hall. Then he stopped. His feet refused to move farther. He didn't belong there any more than he had belonged in the room. He checked his phone. No messages. No missed calls. His son would be waiting, or sleeping, or asking where he was. The promise he had made felt thin now, stretched by circumstance he hadn't planned for. He slid the phone back into his pocket and leaned against the wall again, this time closer to the door. He didn't touch it. He just stood near enough to feel connected. Minutes passed, maybe more. Eventually the door opened. A nurse stepped out carrying a clipboard. She paused when she saw him, eyes narrowing briefly as she processed his presence. Her expression shifted into something neutral and practiced. "You can't be here," she said, not unkindly, not curious either. He nodded immediately. "I know." She waited a beat, as if expecting more. When none came, she turned to leave. "She's stable," the nurse added, already halfway back into motion. "For now." The words weren't meant for him. They landed anyway. "Okay," he said. Too softly to matter. The nurse disappeared back into the room. The door closed again. He stood there a moment longer, absorbing the finality of it. Stable. For now. No thank you. No questions. No acknowledgement that he had been part of the chain that led to that outcome. That was fine. He turned and walked down the hall toward the exit. Each step felt deliberate, measured. He didn't rush. He didn't look back. At the corner, he paused briefly, resting his hand against the cool wall. His palm left a faint smear on the paint. He wiped it on his pants absently and kept going. Behind him, in a room he would not re-enter today, the woman lay surrounded by machines and professionals. Her world had narrowed to numbers and controlled breathing again. But something had shifted. He felt it in the weight he carried with him down the hall, in the knowledge that he had seen her without the layers, that she had seen him decide to stay. The hospital swallowed him as he moved toward the elevators. Doors opened, closed. The routine continued. The wrong door had closed behind him, but it did not feel finished. He is asked to leave without ceremony. A nurse steps into his path near the door, her body angled just enough to block him from drifting back inside. She does not raise her voice. She does not explain. She simply gestures toward the hallway with two fingers and says, "Sir." He nods and moves immediately. Compliance comes easily. He has spent years learning when resistance only makes things worse. He steps away from the room, careful not to look back too long. The door closes before he reaches the corner. The hallway feels colder than before, not just the air. The space itself. The lights seem harsher now that the adrenaline is draining from his system. His legs feel unsteady, like the air no longer certainly belonged to him. He walks until the wall stops him, then leans back against it without thinking. Exhaustion hits all at once. His hands start to shake, not badly, just enough to notice. His shoulders sag forward. The tension he had been holding collapses inward, leaving behind a dull ache that spreads from his neck down his spine. He closes his eyes briefly. Images replay without permission, the monitor dipping, her jaw tightening. The moment she said don't, quiet and absolute. He opens his eyes again, breath shallow, and stares at the floor until the hallway steadies. He wonders if he should have done more. The question is persistent. It does not accuse him outright. It circles. If the button had worked sooner, if he had shouted instead of calling, if he had touched her despite the order, if he had left the room to find help faster, if he pushes the thoughts aside and checks his phone again. Still nothing. The screen's glow hurts his eyes. He pockets it and straightens, forcing himself upright. He starts walking toward the elevators. Each step feels heavier than the last. The sound of his shoes echoes faintly, too loud in the quiet stretch of hallway. He passes doors without reading the signs. Everything looks the same now. White walls, closed rooms, curtains drawn. As he nears the elevator bank, he feels it before he sees it. Her gaze. He glances back instinctively. The door to her room is open again. Only a crack, enough to see the bed from the angle he's standing at, enough to see her head turned toward the doorway. She is watching him leave. There is no expression on her face that he can name. No gratitude, no fear, no anger. Her eyes are steady, assessing. The same way they had been when he first walked in by accident. The authority is still there, weakened, bruised, but intact. He stops walking. For a moment, neither of them moves. The hallway hums around them. Somewhere, a machine beeps steadily. Somewhere else, voices rise and fall in conversation. She does not signal him, does not lift a hand or call his name. She simply watches, committing something to memory. He nods once, reflexive. An acknowledgement without context. Then the door closes again. The moment ends. He turns back toward the elevators, heart heavier now for reasons he cannot place. When the doors open, he steps inside and leans against the wall, closing his eyes as the car descends. The ride down is short, too short for his body to catch up. When the doors open on the ground floor, he hesitates before stepping out. He rubs his face with both hands, palms dragging down over his eyes. His skin feels tight, dry. He takes 2 steps into the lobby before a voice stops him. "Sir." He turns slowly. The nurse stands several feet away, clipboard tucked under one arm, not the one who told him to leave. This one is younger. Her expression is careful, not apologetic, not warm. Yes? He asks. She glances at the clipboard, then back up at him. She asked for you. The words land unevenly. He blinks. Who? The nurse doesn't answer the question. She adjusts her grip on the clipboard. The patient from room 412. He feels a faint tightening in his chest. Confusion first. Then a flicker of something else he doesn't name. Why? He asks. The nurse shrugs slightly. She didn't say. A pause stretches between them. He waits for more explanation. None comes. I'm not family, he says. I'm not. She knows, the nurse interrupts. Not unkindly. She asked anyway. He looks past the nurse, toward the elevators he had just stepped out of, toward the exit beyond the glass doors, toward the parking lot where his car waits, toward the rest of his life that has been on hold since he opened the wrong door. His legs feel heavy again. Okay, he says after a moment. The nurse turns without comment and starts back toward the elevators. He follows, slower this time. Each step carries more weight than before. He is walking back into something without understanding the terms. The ride up feels longer. When the doors open on her floor, the air is colder again. He notices it immediately. Notices everything now. The smell, the sounds. The way his shoulders tense as they walk down the hall. The nurse stops outside the room and gestures for him to go in. She does not enter with him. He hesitates at the threshold, then steps inside. The room looks different. The lights are dimmer. The monitor steadier. The bed has been adjusted. She lies flatter now. Color still pale, but breathing more even. The IV has been changed. The machines hum quietly, subdued. She turns her head toward him as he enters. The authority is still there, but it is thinner now, held together by effort. You took your time, she says. Her voice is rough, controlled, commanding despite the weakness threading through it. He closes the door behind him gently. I was leaving, he replies. She watches him cross the room and stop where he had stood before, not close enough to touch, not far enough to pretend distance. I know, she says. Something has shifted. He can feel it in the way the room holds them, in the fact that he is here because she asked, in the fact that she had to ask it all. Neither of them knows why it matters yet. He stays standing, not because he's unsure where to sit, but because sitting would make this feel permitted, familiar. He keeps his hands at his sides, fingers relaxed but alert, like he might need them again without warning. She notices. Her eyes flick briefly to the empty chair beside the bed, then back to him. She does not invite him to use it. She does not comment on the distance he keeps. The choice hangs between them, unspoken. The monitor continues its quiet rhythm. Steady now, almost convincing. You shouldn't be here, she says. It isn't an accusation, it's an observation. Her tone is level, practiced. The voice of someone who names facts as a way to control them. I was told to come, he replies. A pause. That wasn't an order, she says. He considers that. It sounded like one. The corner of her mouth tightens, not quite a smile. Not displeasure either. Recognition, maybe. She shifts slightly against the pillow, adjusting her position with deliberate care. The movement costs her more than she wants him to see. Her breath catches, just briefly, before she smooths it out again. He doesn't step closer. He doesn't look away. You didn't have to come back, she says. He nods. I know. Another pause settles in, heavier than the first. The kind that fills with meaning if left alone too long. She breaks it. You stayed. Not a question. Yes. Her gaze sharpens. Why? He answers honestly, which surprises him. Because no one else was there. Her eyes flick to the door, then to the machines around her. Then back to him. The room seems smaller when she does that, like the equipment is less reassuring than it should be. That wasn't your responsibility, she says. No, he agrees. She exhales slowly, as if the word weighs something down. Her fingers curl lightly against the sheet, no longer clenched, but not relaxed either. The authority she carries feels different now, less structural. more personal, maintained by will rather than position. You were told to leave, she says. I left, he replies. And you came back. Yes. This time, she studies him longer. Her eyes move over him deliberately. The worn shoes, the tired posture, the lines at the edges of his eyes that come from years of watching and waiting. You have somewhere else you should be, she says. He thinks of his son, of the promise, of the car in the parking lot, of the cold coffee he never finished. Yes, he says again. She nods once, absorbing that. The silent stretches filled only by the monitor and the faint hum of air circulating through the vents. Her hand shifts on the bed, inching closer to the edge. She stops before it hangs over, control reasserting itself. You don't work here, she says. No, you're not family. No, you don't know what you're doing. He meets her gaze. I know when something's wrong. That earns him another look. Different this time, less guarded, more curious. It unsettles him more than the authority ever did. Her breathing deepens slightly, not easier, just steadier. The effort shows in the subtle rise and fall of her chest, in the way her shoulders remain tense, as if relaxing might invite something worse. She closes her eyes briefly, then opens them again. They don't respond well to uncertainty, she says. He doesn't ask who. The machines. The system. The people. It could mean any of it. I noticed, he replies. A faint sound escapes her, almost a laugh but without humor. It fades quickly, replaced by a tight press of her lips. You made things difficult, she says. He nods. I've figured. Another pause. She watches the monitor this time, eyes tracking the numbers. Her jaw tightens, then releases. But you stayed, she adds. Yes. The word feels heavier now, like a choice that can't be taken back. She turns her head toward him again. The effort is visible. Her neck muscles strain slightly before settling. Sit, she says. It is the first direct command she's given him. He hesitates just long enough for it to matter. Then he moves to the chair and sits. The plastic creaks under his weight. He leans forward, forearms resting on his thighs, hands loosely clasped. The change in posture shifts something in the room, lowers the tension by a fraction. He is no longer a figure at the edge. He is present, anchored. She notices that too. I don't like needing help, she says. He doesn't respond immediately. He waits, letting her finish if she wants to. I don't like not knowing what's happening, she continues. And I don't like being watched when I don't have control. He meets her gaze steadily. I can leave. The offer is real, immediate. Her eyes flicker. Something sharp passes through them before she schools it away. No, she says. Then, after a beat, not yet. The words sit between them, unfamiliar and exposed. The authority figure lies back against the pillow, weaker now, still guarded. The single father sits beside her bed, uncertain and tired. Pulled into a moment neither of them understands. Outside the room, the hospital continues on. Inside, survival has quietly redefined the terms. The chair is harder than it looks. The plastic presses into the backs of his thighs, cutting off circulation slowly. He shifts once, then stills, deciding discomfort is preferable to drawing attention to himself. The room feels different now that he's seated. Lower, quieter, like the ceiling has dropped an inch. She watches him adjust and says nothing. The monitor continues its steady rhythm. Too steady, the kind that tempts you to trust it. He doesn't. He keeps his eyes moving. The IV line. Her hands. The shallow rise and fall of her chest. The faint tremor that hasn't quite left her fingers. She notices that too. You're watching the wrong things, she says. He looks at her. Which ones should I watch? Her gaze flicks briefly to the monitor. Those. He follows it, then looks back at her. Machines don't tell you everything. Her jaw tightens. A reflex. She exhales slowly, carefully. No, she agrees. They don't. The admission costs her. It shows in the way her shoulders tense again, in the way her fingers curl against the sheet. She shifts slightly, then stops, breath catching before she can smooth it out. Pain passes through her face in a narrow window. She closes it just as quickly. He stays still. He does not offer help. He does not look away. When her breathing evens out again, she opens her eyes and fixes them on the ceiling. "You didn't have to come back," she says again. The repetition isn't accidental. She's testing the answer, seeing if it changes. "It didn't feel like a choice," he replies. That earns him a glance. Sharp, curious despite herself. "Everything is a choice," she says. "Not always," he answers. Silence follows, thicker this time. It presses against his ears, makes the hum of the machines feel louder. She turns her head slightly toward him. The movement is smaller than before, controlled, deliberate. "Why are you really here?" she asks. The question is different now. Less defensive, more precise. He thinks before answering, not because he wants to craft something acceptable, but because he doesn't fully know himself. "I wanted to know if you were okay," he says finally. Her eyes narrow. "That's not enough." "No," he agrees. "It's not." She waits. He exhales slowly. "I wanted to know if leaving would have made it worse." Something shifts in her expression. Not softness, not relief, understanding. "That's not how responsibility works," she says. "It is when you didn't ask for it," he replies. The words hang between them. Honest, unpolished. She looks away first. Her gaze drifts back to the monitor, then to the IV, then to the wall beyond. The authority she carries feels thinner now, stretched across too many points of failure. "I don't know what happened," she says quietly. "They won't explain it yet." He nods once. He doesn't ask why. Hospitals run on partial truths and deferred explanations. "They told me I stabilized," she continues. "They didn't say why I didn't crash." Her eyes flit back to him, searching, not accusing, measuring. He keeps his voice even. "Sometimes things hold, sometimes they don't." "That's not an answer," she says. "It's the only one I've got." She exhales through her nose. A controlled release of frustration. Her fingers tighten against the sheet again, then relax. "You stayed," she says, "when you shouldn't have." "Yes. And you left," she adds, "when you were told." "Yes. And you came back." "Yes." She closes her eyes briefly, as if aligning something internally. When she opens them, her gaze is steady again. But there's something new there. Not authority, not vulnerability. Dependence. It's faint, uncomfortable, unfamiliar to both of them. "I don't need you to stay," she says. He doesn't answer immediately. The monitor hums. The room breathes. "Okay," he says at last. She opens her eyes wider, surprised despite herself. "That was easy." "It's not," he replies. "But I won't stay if you don't want me to." Another pause. Her breathing deepens, then steadies. She shifts her head slightly on the pillow. "Stay," she says. The word lands differently this time, not as a command, as a request dressed up to look like one. He nods once. "All right." She does not thank him. Instead, she turns her gaze back to the ceiling, jaw set, reclaiming what control she can. The authority returns in pieces. Smaller, more fragile. Still real. Minutes pass. Neither of them speaks. He feels the weight of the chair, the ache in his legs, the pull of everything waiting outside this room. He stays anyway. At some point, a nurse checks in briefly, adjusts the IV, glances at him without comment. Leaves. The woman watches the door close, then exhales slowly. "You can go when they tell you to," she says. "I know. And you don't have to come back again." "I know." She turns her head toward him one last time. Her eyes are steady, unreadable. "But you will," she says. It isn't a question. He doesn't answer. He just stays seated, grounded in the quiet hum of machines and the uneasy truth that something has been set in motion without either of them agreeing to it. The monitor continues its rhythm. For now, morning light never really reaches the room. It filters in weakly through the narrow window, diluted by layers of glass and the angle of the building. The effect is subtle but noticeable. Shadows soften. The machines glow less harshly. Time feels slowed, suspended between night and day. He notices because he hasn't slept. He sits in the same chair, posture unchanged, legs stiff now from hours of stillness. The ache has settled deep into his joints. His mouth tastes stale. His eyes burn when he blinks, but he keeps them open. She's awake again. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Her eyes open the way someone used to command, wakes controlled, immediate, no confusion. She takes in the room in seconds. The monitor, the IV, the chair, him. Her gaze lingers on him just long enough to acknowledge his continued presence. "You're still here," she says. It isn't surprise. It's assessment. "Yes," he replies. She nods once, as if checking something off internally. Then her attention shifts to the nurse entering behind him. The nurse moves efficiently, checking vitals, adjusting the IV, reading numbers without commentary. She speaks to the woman, not to him, uses her last name, uses a tone that is careful without being deferential. "Yes, ma'am. We've notified them. They're aware." He learns without being told. The woman's position is not explained. It doesn't need to be. It shows itself in the way the nurse stands straighter, in the way updates are framed as confirmations rather than reassurances, in the fact that decisions are discussed, not dictated. He is not included. When the nurse leaves, the room settles again into quiet. "You didn't leave," she says, eyes still on the door. "No, you were told you could." "Yes." Another nod. Small, controlled. "You have a child," she says. The statement lands without warning. He looks at her sharply. "How do you know that?" She turns her head slightly toward him. The movement is slower now than it was earlier. Fatigue shows more openly in the daylight. "You checked your phone," she says, 3 times. Each time, you look disappointed. That surprises him more than it should. He doesn't deny it. "Yes." "How old?" "8." She absorbs that. Her fingers shift against the sheet. The IB line tugs slightly, and she stills her hand with visible effort. "You should be with him," she says. The words are neutral. Not judgment. Not dismissal. "Yes," he agrees. "Yet you're here?" "Yes." She studies him again. Longer this time. Not searching for weakness. For clarity. The door opens briefly. A doctor steps in, glances at the chart, speaks in measured tones. Updates are exchanged. Plans outlined. Timelines hinted at without commitment. Again, he is not addressed. When the doctor leaves, the door closes more firmly than before. Boundaries tighten. He feels it immediately. The invisible line drawn around the bed, around her, around the role he does not have. She notices his shift in posture, the way his shoulders tense slightly. "They won't let you do anything," she says. "I know. They won't explain things to you. I know. They'll tolerate you as long as you don't interfere." He meets her gaze. "I'm good at not interfering." That earns him the faintest change in expression. Not a smile. Something like approval. She turns her head back toward the window. The light catches the hollows of her face, making the exhaustion harder to ignore. "I don't need help," she says. He waits. Doesn't answer too quickly. "Okay," he says. Her eyes flick back to him, sharp. She expected resistance. Or reassurance. Instead, she continues. "But I need things." He nods. "Tell me." A pause. She is careful now, measuring each request against pride, necessity, and control. "The call button," she says. "It's out of reach again." He stands, stretches slowly to ease the stiffness in his legs, and adjusts it without touching her. He keeps his movements precise. "Functional. Thank you," she says after a beat. "It's the first time." He nods once and sits back down. Minutes pass. Then more. "My phone," she says eventually. "It's in my bag." He retrieves it, checks the screen without opening anything, places it in her hand. Their fingers do not touch. She scrolls briefly, then sets it aside with a frustrated exhale. "You don't have to stay," she says again. "The repetition is deliberate. I know. You have responsibilities." "Yes. And I am not one of them." He considers his answer carefully, not officially. She closes her eyes. The effort of staying composed shows in the tension along her jaw. The pressure in the room builds. Not dramatic, not loud. Persistent. The weight of proximity without permission. Of obligation without definition. Trust begins here, not as feeling, but as logistics. As small tasks done correctly. As lines not crossed, he stays close enough to matter, far enough not to claim. Time moves differently once the rules are clear. He learns them by watching, by listening to what is said around him and, more importantly, what is not. He is allowed to sit, allowed to fetch, allowed to wait. He is not allowed to ask questions, not allowed to touch equipment, not allowed to stand too close when staff are present. The hospital makes this known without explanation. A nurse pauses when she sees him adjust the chair closer to the bed. Not enough to help, just enough to hear better. The pause is brief. The look is not hostile. But it is enough. He moves the chair back an inch. The nurse continues. Boundary enforced. The woman watches all of it. She says nothing at the time. Later, when the room is quiet again, she speaks. "They don't trust you," she says. "No," he replies. "They don't know me." She considers that distinction. Her fingers tap once against the sheet, a small, restless motion. "They don't need to," she says. "They need you predictable." He nods. That makes sense. Another nurse enters, checks vitals, asks the woman questions that are precise and clipped. Pain level, dizziness, nausea. The woman answers clearly, without complaint. Authority reasserted through competence. When the nurse leaves, the woman exhales and closes her eyes for a moment longer than necessary. He stays quiet. Minutes later, she opens them again. Water. He stands, retrieves the cup from the tray, adjusts the straw without comment. He holds it steady while she drinks. She does not look at him while she does. Her hand hovers near his, then pulls back. She finishes and nods once. Enough. He sets the cup back exactly where it was. No thanks this time. The room settles again. He checks his phone. No messages. The absence presses harder now. His son will be waking soon. Breakfast. School. Questions he won't be there to answer. He feels the pull sharply. She notices the glance. "You're late." "Yes." For him. Yes. She doesn't say more. She doesn't apologize for it either. The fact exists. That is enough. "You should go," she says. He doesn't answer right away. The monitor hums. The IV drips. The clock on the wall ticks loudly in the quiet. "I will," he says finally. "Soon." She nods, accepting the non-commitment. Then she adds casually, "Before you do." She stops. Adjusts her grip on the sheet. The request costs her something. "My bag," she says. There's a folder inside. Top pocket. He retrieves it and places it on the table without opening it. "Inside," she says, "the blue tab." He opens it carefully, extracts the folder, and sets it where she can see it. "Don't read it," she adds. "I won't." She watches him closely as he slides it closer to her. Trust tested. Line held. "Good," she says. She flips through the pages with slow precision. Stops, makes a note on her phone, sets the folder aside. "Thank you." Again. Measured. Controlled. The requests continue like this. Small. Reasonable. Revealing in their accumulation. Adjust the curtain. Check the time. Hand her the phone when a call comes in. Then step back far enough not to hear the conversation. He complies each time without comment. He does not ask who she is. He does not ask why people call her back immediately. He learns anyway. The way voices change on the phone. The way conversations shorten when she says she's in the hospital. The way decisions wait for her confirmation, even now. Influence, not biography. Late morning becomes afternoon. The light shifts again. His exhaustion deepens into something heavier. His body aches. His head throbs faintly behind the eyes. She notices the stiffness when he stands again. You haven't eaten. No. You should. Yes. And you won't. He doesn't answer. That is answer enough. The undefined role stretches tighter. He is not staff, not family, not nothing either. He occupies a narrow space the hospital tolerates but does not endorse. Close, not involved. When another nurse enters and glances at him, the woman speaks before he can move. He's staying, she says. The nurse hesitates, looks at him, then at her, then nods. For now. The power dynamic shifts a fraction, not because she is strong, because she is still commanding. When the nurse leaves, the woman exhales slowly and looks at him. That's all I can do, she says. I know. You'll leave when they tell you to. Yes. And until then. She stops, considers. The next words matter. Until then, you'll stay where you are. He meets her gaze. I can do that. Trust holds. Barely. Built not on emotion, but on compliance, restraint, and the discipline of not crossing lines. The pull toward his son tightens again. So does the strange obligation anchoring him here. Neither wins. Not yet. The hospital enforces time even when nothing else moves. A clock on the wall clicks into the late afternoon. The light outside the window thins, turning pale and flat. The room cools slightly as the building adjusts itself for evening. He feels it in his bones first. His legs ache with a deep, persistent soreness. His shoulders feel locked in place. When he shifts in the chair, the stiffness protests immediately. He ignores it. Pain is familiar. It doesn't scare him. The phone in his pocket does. It vibrates once. Short. Sharp. He freezes. She notices immediately. Go, she says without looking at him. He checks the screen. A missed call. Then another. A message preview flashes just long enough to make his chest tighten. School pickup time. A neighbor covering, questions waiting. He exhales slowly. I need to step out, he says. She nods once. You should. He stands slower than before. His body doesn't want to cooperate. He waits for the dizziness to pass, then straightens. He hesitates beside the bed. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to feel the pull of unfinished responsibility. I won't be long, he says, then stops. He hadn't planned to say that. Her eyes flick up to him. Sharp. Assessing. That's not a promise you should make, she says. He nods. You're right. He turns toward the door. Sir, a nurse says from the hallway, voice firm. He stops. You can't linger, she continues. Visiting hours are. He's leaving, the woman says, cutting in without raising her voice. The nurse pauses, looks between them. Nods once. Fine, she says. But you'll need clearance if you come back. The words hang in the air. He looks at the woman. She is watching him steadily. Guarded. Tired. Tired. Still commanding what she can. I'll handle it, she says. He doesn't ask how. He steps out into the hallway. The door closes behind him with a quiet click that feels heavier than it should. The cold hits immediately. The hum. The distance. He walks fast now, urgency pulling him forward. The elevator ride feels endless. His knee bounces uncontrollably. When the doors finally open, he steps out before they fully part. Outside, the air is sharp and real. The sky has shifted toward evening. He breathes deeply, grounding himself, then unlocks his phone. He returns the calls. Explains only what he has to. Apologizes where necessary. Promises to be home soon. Soon is doing a lot of work. He sits in his car for a moment longer than needed, hands resting on the steering wheel, forehead pressed briefly against it. He closes his eyes. He sees the room, the bed, the monitor, her eyes tracking him. The way she said stay without saying it. He starts the engine. When he returns later that evening, the hospital feels different again, quieter, more guarded. He approaches the desk, already bracing for resistance. The nurse checks a screen, pauses, looks up at him. Room 4 to 12, she says. She cleared it. No explanation. No questions. He nods and moves toward the elevators. Back in the room, the lights are dimmed. Evening has settled fully now. The woman lies on her side, eyes open, watching the door. You came back, she says. Yes. A beat. Good, she replies. That's all. He sits again. The chair creaks. The monitor hums. The boundaries reassert themselves quietly, unchanged. Trust remains procedural, fragile, built on restraint and repetition. The pull between his life and this room tightens, unresolved. He stays anyway. And neither of them names what that might cost next. Time does not pass in clean units anymore. It stretches, pulls thin, loses edges. He learns this somewhere between the second night and the third morning, when the chair has molded itself to his body and his sense of hours has broken down into smaller measures. Drips of the IV, shifts in the light, the cadence of nurses' footsteps outside the door. He sleeps in fragments. Never fully. Never deep. His head drops forward, chin brushing his chest, and he jerks awake moments later, heart racing, unsure what sound pulled him back. Sometimes it's the monitor. Sometimes it's nothing at all. His body has decided rest is unsafe. Her condition does not crash. That would be easier. Instead, it slips. Small changes. Quiet ones. Numbers that stay within acceptable ranges but trend the wrong direction. Blood pressure that dips and recovers. Oxygen that holds steady until it doesn't, then corrects itself before alarm sound. The room becomes a place of constant adjustment. Nurses come more often now. They speak softly. They confer just outside the door, voices lowered, words clipped. He catches fragments without context. Watch it. Not yet. If it drops again. She hears them too. She never comments when staff are present. Never contradicts. Never demands. She listens, stores information, maintains control through silence. But when the door closes, the tension shows. Her jaw stays tight longer. Her eyes track the monitor more frequently. Her breathing becomes shallower when she thinks no one is watching. He watches anyway. You're tired, she says at one point, not looking at him. Yes, you should sleep. I do. That earns him a glance. Sharp, disbelieving. You're lying, she says. Not well, he admits. She studies him for a moment, then turns her gaze back to the ceiling. That's unsustainable. So is this, he replies quietly. She doesn't argue. The hours grind on. Meals arrive for her. Trays he helps position, lids he removes, straws he adjusts. She eats little. Enough to satisfy the nurse, not enough to convince him. He eats worse. Coffee from the vending machine, crackers from his pocket, a sandwich he forgets halfway through and finishes cold hours later. His phone becomes a ledger of loss. Missed shifts, rescheduled meetings, rides owed, favors called in and not returned. Each choice to stay longer costs something tangible, money he hadn't planned to spend, sleep he can recover, certainty about what comes next. He doesn't tell her any of this. She notices anyway. You're not working, she says, late one afternoon. He shrugs slightly. Not today. That's not what I said. He meets her gaze. No. A pause stretches between them. That will matter, she says. Yes. You're choosing this. He doesn't answer right away. He looks at the IB line. The monitor. Her hands folded too tightly in her lap. Yes, he says finally. The word lands heavier now than it did before. Her fingers flex once, then still. A flicker of something crosses her face. Not guilt, not relief. Fear. It's quick. almost gone before he's sure he saw it. Her condition dips again that night. Not enough for alarms. Enough for a nurse to linger. Enough for medication to be adjusted. Enough for her breathing to grow shallow and careful. She doesn't complain. She doesn't call attention to it. She just watches him more closely, as if measuring whether he'll notice. He does. He shifts closer without being asked, not touching, just nearer. Within reach if something goes wrong. His presence becomes a fixed point in the room. Predictable. Consistent. She starts to rely on that. Not verbally, not directly. When her breathing tightens, her eyes flick to him before the monitor. When pain breaks through her control, she steadies herself faster if he's watching. When a nurse leaves and the room goes quiet, she exhales more fully knowing he's still there. Power shifts in inches, not miles. She still commands the room when she can. Still directs conversations. Still makes decisions. But when things wobble, when the small failures stack up, she lets him absorb some of the weight. Scarcity creeps in quietly. Not of resources, of time. He feels it in the way his body slows, in the way decisions take longer, in the way he has to choose which messages to answer and which to ignore. She feels it too. "I don't need you here every minute," she says one morning, voice tight with effort. "I know. You could leave. Come back later." "Yes. But you won't." He meets her gaze. "Not yet." Her eyes soften for half a second, then harden again. "That's a mistake," she says. "Maybe." Silence fills the room again, thick and heavy. Neither of them says what it's costing, but both of them are counting. The mistake compounds slowly. It does not announce itself. It shows up in the smallest places first. He misses a call from his son's school. Then another. The voicemail is calm, practiced, administrative. It makes his stomach tighten anyway. He returns it from the hallway. Voice low, promising solutions he hasn't fully mapped out yet. When he comes back into the room, she is watching him. "You didn't sit down," she says. "I was gone 2 minutes." "That's not what I said." He exhales and lowers himself into the chair. His knees protest sharply this time. He feels the pain travel up into his hips and lower back. He adjusts, then stills. Her gaze drops to his hands. They're trembling slightly now. He hadn't noticed until she looked. "You're burning out," she says. "Not yet." "You're close." He doesn't deny it. The nurse comes in shortly after. Checks vitals. Frowns faintly at the numbers. Makes a note. Adjusts a setting. Leaves without explanation. The door clicks shut. Her breathing changes almost immediately. Not dramatically. Just enough, he notices, because he has started measuring time by her breaths. By the pause between inhale and exhale. By the way her shoulders rise when the room is quiet. "Does it hurt?" he asks. She hesitates. That alone is answer enough. "A little," she says finally. "Do you want me to get someone?" "No." The word comes too fast. He waits. Okay. Minutes pass. The pain does not escalate. It also does not recede. It sits with her, persistent and grinding. She grips the edge of the blanket. Her knuckles whiten, then relax. Control in cycles. He stays still. "You should go home tonight," she says suddenly. He looks at her. "Why?" "Because this is not sustainable," she replies. "And because I don't need an audience." He considers the words. "I'm not watching." "Yes, you are." She turns her head toward him. Her eyes are sharp, but there is strain there now. The authority feels thinner in the face of prolonged discomfort. "You notice everything," she continues. "You don't comment. You don't interfere. You just stay." He nods. "That's what I do." Her gaze lingers, then drops away. "That's dangerous," she says quietly. "For who?" She doesn't answer right away. Another small failure stacks. Her oxygen dips briefly. Not enough to trigger alarms. Enough to change her breathing. She corrects it instinctively, taking slower, deeper breaths. Her jaw tightens. Sweat beads at her temple. He stands without asking. Moves closer. Still doesn't touch. "Do you want me to call?" he asks. She shakes her head once. Sharp. Defiant. He stays standing. Anchored. Prisoned. The dip passes. She exhales, long and controlled. Her shoulders sag slightly before she catches herself and straightens. When she looks at him again, something has changed. "You didn't argue," she says. "There was nothing to argue. You didn't leave either." "No." She studies him. The room hums quietly around them. "That's new," she says. "For you?" "Yes." She closes her eyes for a moment, then opens them again. The fatigue is harder to hide now. The cracks in control are no longer momentary. They linger. Another nurse enters, adjusts medication, mentions labs, leaves again. The pattern repeats. Time stretches further. He loses track of meals entirely. Drinks water when his head starts to ache, eats when his hands start to shake too much to ignore. He stops counting hours and starts counting nurse visits. She tracks his deterioration with the same precision she tracks her own. "You're slower," she says. "Am I?" "You hesitate before you stand." He considers it. She's right. "You're not thinking as clearly," she adds. "That's debatable." She looks at him steadily. "You forgot to charge your phone." He checks it. 10%. He plugs it in without comment. "You can't afford to run out," she says. He meets her gaze. "Neither can you." A pause. She looks away first. The power dynamic shifts again, subtle but undeniable. She's no longer the only one managing risk in the room. She's no longer the only one calculating costs. Reliance forms not as comfort, but as necessity. Late that night, she reaches for the call button and misses it. Her hand trembles, fingers brushing air. He is already moving. He adjusts it into her hand without touching her skin. She wraps her fingers around it, relief flashing briefly across her face before control reasserts itself. "Thank you," she says quietly. The words carry more weight now. He sits back down. His body sinks into the chair like it might not get up again. Time continues to stretch. And staying continues to cost him more than he planned. The night settles in without ceremony. Lights dim, voices lower. The hallway outside thins to a quiet shuffle of late shifts and muted conversations. The room grows colder, or maybe he just notices it more now that his body has started to give up heat. He wraps his arms loosely across his chest and stays still. She is awake again. Not alert, not resting. Suspended in the space between where pain and control negotiate constantly. Her breathing is careful, measured, each inhale deliberate, as if she's rationing air the way someone rations water when they're not sure how long they'll be stranded. The monitor hums. Numbers hold. Barely. A nurse checks in, makes small adjustments, mentions the word trend without explaining it, leaves. The door closes. The room feels emptier afterward. "You don't have to stay tonight," she says. Her voice is softer than before, not weak, tired. He doesn't answer immediately. His head feels heavy. His thoughts come slower now, like they have to push through resistance to reach the surface. "I know," he says finally. She watches him from the corner of her eye. "You're not thinking clearly." "That's possible. You're making this harder on yourself." "Yes." She shifts slightly, then stops, breath catching before she can smooth it out. Pain flares and fades in her face. She closes her eyes until it passes. When she opens them again, the control is back but thinner. "I didn't ask you to give anything up," she says. He nods. "I know. You have a child?" "Yes." "And you're here?" "Yes." The repetition weighs differently now. Each yes carries accumulated cost. She turns her head toward him fully. The effort shows. Her neck muscles strain. She pauses halfway through the movement, then completes it with visible care. "Why?" she asks. The question is quieter than before, less guarded, more dangerous. He exhales slowly through his nose. His chest feels tight, Not from panic, but from fatigue pressing in on everything. Because if I leave, he says, I'll keep thinking about what happens when I'm not here. She holds his gaze, doesn't interrupt, and because staying, he continues, lets me see what's actually happening, not what people say is happening. Her jaw tightens. And what do you see? He answers honestly, that you're scared. The word lands hard. For a moment he thinks he's gone too far. Crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Her eyes narrow. Her posture stiffens. Authority flares reflexively. A shield rising. That's incorrect, she says. He doesn't argue. He waits. Seconds stretch. The monitor hums. Her breathing shifts again, shallow and controlled. Eventually, her shoulders drop a fraction. No, she says quietly. It's not. The admission is barely audible. It cost her more than any request she's made so far. She turns her gaze back to the ceiling. The lights reflect faintly in her eyes. I'm not afraid of dying, she says. I'm afraid of not knowing when I lose control. He nods once. He understands that. Right now, she continues, it happens in pieces. Small ones. Easy to deny. Her fingers tighten against the sheet again. The tremor is more pronounced now. She doesn't hide it. And you see all of them, she adds. Yes, he says. That's inconvenient. Yes. A pause. And useful, she says reluctantly. The word shifts something between them. She exhales slowly, carefully. Her breathing steadies again, but it takes effort. You're consistent, she says. You don't react. You don't dramatize. You don't disappear. He listens. That makes it easier, she continues, to focus on what matters. He feels the weight of that settle into his chest. Not pride. Responsibility. Another small failure compounds. Her blood pressure dips again. Just slightly. Enough for the monitor to note it. Not enough for alarms. The nurse won't be back for another 15 minutes. She notices the numbers. Her jaw tightens. She adjusts her breathing, fighting her own body for compliance. He stands. Not abruptly. Not fast. Just enough to be ready. She watches him do it. Doesn't tell him to sit. Doesn't tell him to sit. Doesn't tell him to leave. The dip passes. She exhales, shoulders sagging before she straightens again. You're not trained for this, she says. No. You could miss something. Yes. And yet you're still here. Yes. Silence settles again, heavy and shared. He feels it now more clearly than before. The scarcity. Not of supplies. Not of options. Of time. Of energy. Of how many nights like this his body can endure before something else gives. She feels it too. I won't ask you to stay tomorrow, she says quietly. He doesn't respond. And I won't stop you if you leave tonight. He looks at her. She keeps her gaze on the ceiling. I need to know, she adds, that if you're here, it's because you choose to be, not because you think you owe me. He considers that. The question beneath the words. I choose to be here, he says. She closes her eyes. The tension in her face eases slightly, like a muscle finally allowed to rest. Then stay, she says. Not as a command, as acknowledgement. He sits back down. The chair creaks. His body sinks into it, exhausted but steady. The monitor continues its quiet rhythm. Time stretches on, and the cost of staying becomes something they both understand now, even if neither of them is ready to stop paying it. The setback doesn't announce itself. There's no sudden alarm, no rush of staff, no dramatic shift in the room. It begins the way everything has lately, quietly, almost politely, as if her body is asking permission before it fails. He notices it before the monitor does. Her breathing changes first, not shallower. Slower. Too slow. The pauses between breaths stretch just enough to feel wrong. Her chest rises, holds, then releases like it's working through resistance. She notices it too. Her eyes flick to the monitor, then to him. For the first time since he met her, she doesn't hide it fast enough. Fear crosses her face openly. Not panic, not hysteria, a clear, sharp recognition of loss of control. She tries to correct it. Her jaw tightens, her shoulders tense. She forces a deeper breath, then another. The movement costs her. He sees it in the tremor that runs through her arms, in the way her fingers curl hard against the sheet. The monitor ticks down. Just a little. Her blood pressure drops again. Lower than before, slower to recover. She swallows. Her throat works. She reaches for the call button and misses it. Her hand falls short. Fingers brush the mattress uselessly. She freezes. For half a second, the authority disappears completely. She looks at him. Not commanding. Not testing. Needing. He is already standing. He does not rush. He does not speak. He steps close enough to adjust the call button into her hand, careful not to touch her skin. His movements are steady, controlled, functional. She grips the button, presses it once. Nothing happens immediately. Her breathing stutters. The control she's been maintaining for days finally fractures. Her chest heaves as she pulls in air that doesn't come easily. Her eyes close tight, then open again, unfocused for a moment. I can't. She starts, then stops. The sentence doesn't matter. The fact does. She is losing the fight to manage this quietly. The monitor dips again. This time the sound is sharper, more insistent. He presses the call button again himself, holding it down longer. Still nothing. He glances at the door. The hallway beyond is empty. Night staff stretched thin. He knows the pattern now. She exhales sharply, breath breaking into something uneven. Her control collapses fully this time. Her face tightens with effort she can no longer hide. Her hands tremble openly. I don't. Her voice falters. She swallows hard. I don't feel right. The words are flat. Factual. Stripped of authority. He nods once. I know. He steps to the door and raises his voice, not shouting, not panicked. Clear. Projected. The way you speak when you need to be heard, without creating chaos. Room 412, he calls. I need someone now. His voice carries down the hallway. He turns back to her immediately. She is pale now, paler than before. Sweat beads along her hairline. Her eyes struggle to focus, darting between him and the monitor. He moves the chair out of the way with his foot, plants himself where he can see everything at once her, the monitor, the door. He does not touch her. He does not tell her to breathe. He does not offer comfort. He cannot deliver. He watches. The monitor dips again, then steadies. Barely. Her breathing becomes erratic. Shallow bursts followed by long pauses that stretch his nerves tight. Stay with me, he says quietly. Not a plea, a directive, grounded. Her eyes lock onto his. She nods once, sharply, as if clinging to the instruction because it's simpler than managing everything else. Footsteps sound in the hall, closer this time. The door opens and a nurse steps in, then stops short when she sees the numbers. Another nurse follows, then another. The room fills with movement and quiet urgency. Words are exchanged quickly, efficiently. Blood pressure cuff reapplied. IV checked. Medication adjusted. No one asks him to move. No one tells him to stay. He remains exactly where he is, out of the way, but present. Watching the monitor. Watching her face. Watching for anything they miss. She grimaces as something is administered. Her hand tightens around the sheet. She makes a small sound she doesn't bother to suppress. Control is gone now. Completely. She turns her head toward him again, eyes wide and unguarded. I can't, she starts. I know, he says again. That's all. The nurse glances at him briefly, then back to the monitor. We're stabilizing her, she says, more to the room than to anyone specific. He nods once. The numbers creep upward. Slowly, reluctantly. Her breathing evens out by degrees. Not smooth, not easy, but manageable. The tension in her shoulders releases a fraction at a time. Her grip loosens. Her eyes close briefly, then open again, glassy with exhaustion. The nurses finish their adjustments. One of them finally looks at him directly. "You can step back now," she says. He does. No argument. No hesitation. He returns to the chair and sits, hands resting on his knees. His pulse thuds heavily in his ears now that the immediate pressure has eased. His body catches up all at once, flooding him with delayed fatigue. The nurses confer quietly, then file out. The door closes behind them. The room settles into a fragile calm. She stares at the ceiling, chest rising and falling with effort. Her face is slack with exhaustion. There is no authority left to summon right now, no mask to hold in place. After a long moment, she turns her head toward him. Her eyes are steady again. Changed. She does not say thank you. She says, "You didn't hesitate." He meets her gaze. There wasn't time. A pause stretches between them. "And you didn't do more than necessary," she adds. "No." She studies him carefully, not assessing competence, acknowledging restraint. "That matters," she says. He nods once. "This is different. Not gratitude. Recognition." The calm that follows is not reassuring. It's thin, fragile, the kind that exists only because something worse has been pushed back, not resolved. He knows the difference. He's lived in that space before, watching a child's fever dip just enough to sleep, knowing it could spike again without warning. He stays alert. She lies still, eyes half closed, breathing measured but shallow. The lines around her mouth haven't softened. Her body hasn't recovered. It's only paused. The monitor holds. Barely. He watches it without staring. He's learned how to look without provoking attention from staff, from her. He tracks patterns, not numbers. Rhythm over data. Minutes pass. Then more. Her hand shifts on the sheet. Just slightly. Fingers flexing as if testing whether they still obey. The movement costs her. Her breath stutters once before she reins it back in. He doesn't comment. He adjusts the chair closer by an inch, slow enough not to draw notice if someone walks by. He positions himself where he can see her face clearly without leaning in. She notices anyway. "You're closer," she says. "Yes." She doesn't object. Another nurse comes in, checks vitals again, frowns less this time, but not enough to relax. Makes another note, mentions watching overnight. Leaves. The door closes. Silence stretches again, thicker now because they both know how easily it can tear. Her eyes open fully. She looks at him differently than before, not as a presence she tolerates, not as a variable she manages, as a constant. "You didn't panic," she says. "No." "You didn't try to fix me." "No." "You didn't wait for permission either." He considers that. "I waited until it mattered." She absorbs that slowly. The authority she normally carries would correct the framing, would challenge the implication that he gets to decide when something matters. She doesn't. Her throat works as she swallows. Dry, fatigued. "You understood the timing," she says. "I've had practice," he replies. "With hospitals? With people," he says. A pause follows. She studies him, eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion, but recalibration. "You kept your voice low," she says. "You didn't raise alarms you couldn't control." He nods. Noise makes things worse. "Yes," she agrees quietly. "It does." She shifts her head on the pillow, then stops when discomfort flares. Her hand tightens reflexively. This time, she doesn't hide it. He waits. The pain passes enough for her to speak again. "They respond differently to calm," she says. "Staff. Systems." He meets her gaze. "So do people." Her eyes hold his for a long moment. Something in her expression loosens. Not relief. Alignment. Another subtle shift in power. Not because he's taken it. Because she's letting it go in pieces. The monitor dips again. Smaller this time. Quick. It recovers almost immediately. She sees it. Her eyes flick to the screen, then back to him. He does not move. She exhales slowly, following his stillness. Her breathing steadies in response, mirroring his without realizing it. He notices. So does she. "You're anchoring the room," she says. He shrugs slightly. "Someone has to." That's not your role. No, he agrees, but it's what's needed. Another pause. She does not contradict him. Fatigue settles into both of them now, heavier than before. The adrenaline from the setback drains away, leaving behind the cost. His hands ache. His shoulders burn. His head throbs dully behind the eyes. He shifts his weight carefully, mindful not to disturb the fragile equilibrium. Her eyelids droop. She fights it, then gives in slightly. Not sleep, just rest. Her breathing evens out by degrees. He stays alert. A soft sound escapes her throat. Unintentional. Vulnerable. She stills, then relaxes when nothing follows. He notices the tremor in her fingers again. More pronounced now. The mask is gone. She no longer has the energy to maintain it fully. You should rest, he says quietly. She exhales. I don't trust my body right now. I'll watch, he replies. She opens her eyes again, sharp despite exhaustion. You're not a nurse. No. You're not trained. No. You could miss something. Yes. The pattern repeats. But the weight has changed, and you're still offering, she says. Yes. She considers him for a long moment, then nods once, small and decisive. Then watch, she says. Not a command, a delegation. She closes her eyes again. This time, she doesn't fight it. Her breathing deepens slightly. The tension in her shoulders eases a fraction. Not sleep, but something close enough to matter. He stays exactly where he is. He does not relax. He does not lean back. He does not check his phone. He keeps his focus narrow and steady, conserving energy the way he's learned to. Minutes pass. A nurse peeks in quietly, sees the numbers, sees him seated and attentive, and leaves without comment. The system adjusts around him now, subtly, without acknowledgement. She stirs once, frowns faintly, then settles again. The authority figure rests in a position she cannot mask. Helplessness exposed, not dramatized. Real. He does nothing to soften it. He simply holds the line. When she opens her eyes again, sometime later, she looks directly at him. You didn't move, she says. No. You didn't leave. No. And you didn't take advantage of it. He meets her gaze steadily. That wasn't the point. A pause stretches between them. Longer than before. Trust settles in quietly. Not as comfort, as certainty. She nods once. The movement is small, but deliberate. Good, she says. He doesn't respond. He just keeps watching the room, the monitor, her breathing doing what is needed, nothing more. The room holds steady longer than expected, not because the danger is past, but because everything fragile is being handled carefully. The monitor maintains its rhythm. Her breathing stays even enough to trust moment to moment. The silence becomes less threatening, more watchful. He does not relax. He measures time in intervals now. Nurse visits, medication checks, subtle shifts in her posture. He notices when her brow tightens before the pain reaches her mouth. He notices when she swallows more often, when her fingers tremble less. She wakes fully again just before dawn. Her eyes open and settle on him immediately, as if she never lost track of where he was. You're still here, she says. Yes. The word lands differently now. He hears it too. She draws in a careful breath. Her voice is stronger than it was hours ago, though still rough at the edges. That shouldn't surprise me, she adds. No. She studies him for a moment longer. The exhaustion in her face is still there, but something else has replaced the raw strain. Awareness. Adjustment. I lost control, she says. It is not framed as complaint or apology. It is a statement of fact, acknowledged without flinching. Yes, he replies. You didn't step over me when it happened. No. You stepped around it. He considers the wording, then nods once. That sounds right. Her lips press together. She looks away, gaze settling on the far wall. The authority she carries is reorganizing itself, recalibrating around new information. That's rare, she says quietly. He doesn't ask what she means. He already knows. Footsteps sound in the hall. A nurse enters, followed by another. They check vitals, confer softly, make notes. One of them glances at him again, then at her. She's stable, the nurse says. For now. He has heard that phrase before. She nods, acknowledging the reality without reacting to it. The nurses leave. The door closes. She turns her head back toward him. You didn't claim credit, she says. No. You didn't wait for permission. No. You didn't ask for acknowledgement. No. She holds his gaze steadily. The recognition deepens. Not warmth. Not affection. Trust, built on evidence. That's leadership, she says. He shifts slightly in the chair. His body protests the movement. I wasn't leading. You were, she replies. You just didn't say so. He doesn't argue. The distinction matters to her more than to him. I don't trust easily, she continues, especially when I'm compromised. I know. You didn't try to earn it. No. You just behaved in a way that made it unavoidable. The words settle between them, heavy with implication. The power dynamic shifts again, not dramatically, not all at once. The authority does not disappear. It reshapes itself. Makes room. She exhales slowly, carefully. Her breathing is steadier now. The worst is past for the moment. What happens if it happens again, she asks. He answers without hesitation. We do the same thing. She studies him. You don't promise outcomes. No. You promise process. Yes. A faint, almost imperceptible nod. That's acceptable, she says. The clock ticks toward morning. Light begins to thin the shadows again. The room resets into another version of calm. He feels the weight of the night settle into his bones. His eyes burn. His muscles ache. The cost is undeniable now. She sees it. You need rest, she says. Yes. You should go home. Soon. She accepts that the same way she accepts everything else, by not pushing where resistance would do harm. You've done what was needed, she says. Not thanks. Release. He stands carefully, joints stiff, movements deliberate. He pauses beside the chair, steadying himself. She watches him, alert to the shift. You'll come back, she says. It is not framed as expectation. It is a recognition of pattern. Yes, he says. She nods once. Then go, she says, before the cost gets higher. He turns toward the door, then stops. Call if you need something, he says. She meets his gaze. I know. He leaves the room quietly, the door closing behind him with less weight than before. The authority figure lies back against the pillow, control rebuilt in a new configuration. The single father walks down the hallway, exhausted but steady, having earned something that cannot be revoked. Not gratitude. Trust. He does not rush, and the room, for the first time since he entered it, feels capable of holding without him for now. He leaves the hospital before sunrise. The sky is flat and colorless, the kind of morning that doesn't promise anything. He sits in his car for a long moment before starting the engine, hands resting on the wheel, eyes unfocused. His body feels hollowed out. The adrenaline is gone. What's left is weight. His phone lights up again. He doesn't check it immediately. When he does, the messages stack in a way that makes his chest tighten. Missed pickup. A confused voicemail from his son's teacher. A short clip text from his supervisor asking if he plans to come in at all this week. He exhales slowly and puts the car in gear. Home feels farther than it should. When he opens the apartment door, the silence hits first. Too quiet. His son's backpack sits by the door untouched. Shoes kicked off wrong. The small signs of routine disruption feel louder than any alarm. His son looks up from the couch when he enters. Dad, the word is cautious, not accusing, but close. I'm here, he says. The boy studies his face, taking in the dark circles, the stiffness in his posture. Kids notice more than adults think. You said you'd be home, his son says. I know. There's no explanation that won't feel like excuse. He doesn't try to make one. Breakfast is late. The routine stutters. His son eats quietly, eyes flicking up at him between bites. Are you working today? The boy asks. I don't know yet. That answer lands badly. He sees it immediately. After he drops his son at school, he sits in the car again, forehead pressed briefly to the steering wheel. He calculates hours, money, missed shifts, how long goodwill lasts before it turns into something else. Work is already unstable. By the time he gets to the job site, the damage has begun. A conversation pulled aside, a look that says patience has limits. He listens more than he speaks, takes responsibility where he can, offers nothing he can't guarantee. Figure it out, his supervisor says finally. He nods. I am. It's not enough. He knows that too. By midday, he's back at the hospital. The walk down the hallway feels different now. Not heavier. Sharper. Each step carries consequence instead of uncertainty. He knows what staying costs now. He also knows what leaving would cost. The nurse at the desk recognizes him, says nothing, waves him through. Inside the room, she's awake. She looks better. Marginally. Color improved. Breathing steadier. Control rebuilt carefully around what's left. She notices him immediately. You're back earlier than expected, she says. I didn't stay long, he replies. Her eyes narrow slightly. She sees it anyway. The exhaustion. The strain behind his eyes. You went home. Yes. And it didn't go well. He doesn't answer right away. That wasn't a question, she adds. No, he says. It didn't. She studies him more closely now. The authority returns by degrees, but it doesn't erase awareness. She sees the cost written into his posture. Your son, she says. Yes. He noticed. Yes. Silence stretches. She turns her head toward the window, then back to him. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask. That's not the same thing. No. She shifts slightly, wincing before she can stop herself. The weakness is still there, just quieter. You're destabilizing your life, she says. Yes, because of me. He meets her gaze steadily. Because of staying. The distinction matters. She absorbs that. Her fingers curl lightly against the sheet, then relax. I didn't ask you to do that, she says. I know. And yet you keep doing it. Yes. The imbalance deepens in that moment. Her survival has become a variable in his stability. Not abstract, not theoretical, real, immediate. She looks at him longer than before. The authority she carries recalibrates again, this time under moral weight instead of physical threat. You can't keep pretending this is neutral, she says. Neither can he. The room does not offer relief. It never has. But today, it feels sharper, less forgiving. The quiet presses in with intent, as if the space itself is waiting for him to admit something he's been avoiding. She watches him without blinking. You look like someone who's run out of margin, she says. He lowers himself into the chair carefully. His legs ache from standing too long, from sleeping too little. That's accurate. You didn't eat, she adds. I did. Coffee doesn't count. He doesn't argue. He rubs his palms together once, a small grounding motion. The chair creaks under his weight. My son missed pickup yesterday, he says. She stills. The words hang in the air. Not dramatic. Not accusatory. Just factual. That doesn't happen, she says. No, he agrees. It doesn't. She shifts slightly on the bed, then stops, managing the discomfort without comment. Her eyes don't leave his face. How did he handle it? She asks. He waited, he says. A teacher stayed with him. A neighbor helped. Her jaw tightens. She exhales slowly through her nose. And when you got home? He didn't yell, he says. That was worse. She closes her eyes briefly. When she opens them, the authority has softened into something more deliberate. That's a cost, she says. Yes. And work? He lets out a slow breath. Unstable. How unstable? How unstable? Enough that one more missed day matters. She absorbs that. Her fingers curl against the sheet again, this time not from pain, but from tension. You came anyway, she says. Yes. The silence stretches longer now. He can feel it pulling at both of them. You didn't tell me any of this, she says again. I didn't want it to matter here. But it does, she replies, whether you want it to or not. He nods. He doesn't argue. Her gaze drops to the monitor briefly, then returns to him. Her breathing is steady now, but the effort remains visible. My condition isn't stable yet, she says. You know that. Yes. And you staying makes it easier for me to manage that. Yes. And harder for you to manage everything else. Yes. The repetition tightens the space between them. You're not doing this for me, she says. No. You're doing it because you don't leave things unfinished. He considers that. Probably. That's not sustainable, she says. I know. She shifts again, then settles, the movement careful and controlled. Her voice lowers slightly. If this continues, she says, something in your life breaks. He meets her gaze. Something already is. The admission lands heavier than anything else he said. She looks away first this time. The power imbalance deepens, not in her favor, but in the complexity of it. She has influence, resources, control in other arenas. And yet here, her survival is tied to his presence in a way that threatens him more than it threatens her. That's not acceptable, she says quietly. He waits. To you, she adds. Yes. And to me, she continues after a pause. That's new. She turns her head back toward him. The authority returns, but it's sharpened by awareness instead of denial. We can't keep pretending this is incidental, she says. Your presence here is not neutral. No, he agrees. It's an intervention, she says. One with consequences. He shifts forward slightly, forearms resting on his thighs. What are you saying? She holds his gaze. I'm saying you don't get to absorb all the cost alone. That's not how this works, he replies. It is now, she says. Another nurse enters, checks vitals, glances at him, then leaves. The interruption is brief but grounding. When the door closes again, she continues. You have obligations, she says. A child. A job. Yes. And I have leverage, she says. The word lands cleanly. Precisely. He stiffens. I don't want that. I know, she replies, which is why it matters. She does not elaborate yet. She lets the implications settle. You can't keep choosing me without acknowledging the cost, she says. And I can't accept the benefit without owning it. The moral weight settles fully now. No speeches, no accusations, just the tightening of choices. Neither of them can pretend neutrality anymore. She watches him closely, waiting to see if he pushes back. He doesn't. He exhales slowly. Then what? She answers without hesitation. Then we change the terms. The room holds its breath. Not because a solution has appeared, but because the pretending has ended. He doesn't answer right away. The words changed to terms hang in the room, heavier than any alarm. They don't sound like a solution. They sound like commitment, like ownership, like a door closing somewhere he hasn't fully mapped yet. She watches him carefully, alert to the silence. You don't like that, she says. No, he replies. I don't. Because it removes the illusion that you're just helping, she continues, and turns it into something deliberate. Yes. He shifts in the chair, discomfort flaring through his lower back. He doesn't hide it. He's too tired to bother. You don't want leverage over me, he says. And I don't want to owe you anything. She nods. That's why this is difficult. The monitor hums steadily. The numbers hold. The crisis is eased, but the pressure hasn't. She turns her head slightly, studying the IV line, the machines, the room that has stripped her down to functions and limits. I am not used to being the liability, she says. He doesn't respond. He lets her finish. I am used to managing outcomes, she continues. Risk, resources, people. Her gaze returns to him, sharper now, more focused. And right now, she says, I am a risk to you. Yes, he agrees. And you are absorbing that risk without any protection, she adds. That's my choice, he says. It's an uninformed one, she replies. Because you're pretending this ends when I'm discharged. He stiffens slightly. You don't know that, he says. I do, she replies calmly. Because you won't walk away from something unfinished. And this, she gestures weakly at herself, won't feel finished to you. He doesn't argue. He can't. The truth sits between them, solid and uncomfortable. You missed your son's pickup, she says. That's not theoretical damage, that's real. Yes, and if you miss another, she continues, the cost compounds. Yes, eventually, she says, you don't get to explain it away. He rubs a hand over his face, exhaustion breaking through his restraint for the first time. I know. She watches him do it, the mask slip. Just enough. You're not reckless, she says. You're disciplined, which means this will break you slowly, not all at once. The accuracy of it lands hard. You came back anyway, he says. Yes, she replies, and that's on me. The imbalance tightens again, but this time it cuts both ways. I won't let you keep paying for my stability with yours, she says. That's not how hospitals work, he replies. No, she agrees, but that's how power works. He looks at her sharply. I'm not talking about control over you, she adds immediately. I'm talking about responsibility. A pause. If your presence here is making the difference, she says, then I own the consequences of that. He leans back in the chair, the plastic creaking. His head feels heavy. His thoughts move slower now, thick with fatigue and pressure. And what does that look like, he asks. She answers carefully. It looks like you not being the only one making sacrifices. That's vague, he says. Yes, she agrees, because the details matter, and we're not there yet. Another nurse enters briefly, checks vitals, mentions that things are holding, leaves again. When the door closes, she continues. You can't stay here the way you have been, she says, and I can't ask you to. I haven't asked, he says. I know, she replies. That's the problem. She shifts slightly, managing discomfort, then settles again. You need to leave tonight, she says. The statement is firm, not cruel, not dismissive. He feels resistance flare immediately. I don't think that's a good idea. She meets his gaze. That's because you're measuring the wrong risk. He exhales slowly. And you're not? I am, she says, just differently. Silence stretches again. My son needs me tonight, he says quietly. Yes, she replies. And you need someone here, he adds. Yes. The symmetry of it is uncomfortable. You don't trust the staff, he says. I trust systems, she replies. I trust you. The words land harder than anything else she's said. Not gratitude, not affection. Trust with weight behind it. That doesn't mean you stay, she continues. It means you stop pretending this is cost-free. He considers that. His jaw tightens. You're asking me to choose, he says. Yes. And whatever I choose, he adds, something pays. Yes. The moral weight settles fully now. No speeches, no reassurance. Just consequence. He stands slowly. His body protests. He steadies himself on the chair. I'll come back tomorrow, he says. She nods. Good. And tonight, he continues, I go home. Yes. She watches him carefully, making sure he doesn't add qualifiers. When he doesn't, she exhales slowly. That's the first responsible decision you've made about this, she says. He doesn't take offense. He turns toward the door, then pauses. If something changes, he starts. I'll call, she says. Not you, the staff. He nods once. He leaves the room quietly, the door closing behind him, with a heavier sense of consequence than before. Down the hallway, his steps feel deliberate, measured. He is no longer choosing presence by default. He is choosing it with awareness. And that makes everything ahead more dangerous. She calls him before dawn. Not the hospital, not the nurse's station. His phone vibrates on the nightstand, sharp and insistent in the quiet of his apartment. He wakes instantly, already alert, heart pounding as he reaches for it. Her name is on the screen. He sits up, rubbing a hand over his face before answering. Yes. I didn't follow the plan, she says. Her voice is steady, controlled, too steady. He doesn't ask which plan. Are you stable? For now? The pause that follows is deliberate, measured. I asked them to delay the transfer, she continues. His jaw tightens. You weren't cleared for that. No, she agrees. I wasn't. He swings his legs off the bed and stands, already pulling on a shirt. Why? Because I needed to know, she says, whether you would come if I asked. The words land hard, not manipulative. Exposed. He stops moving. That's not fair, he says. I know, she replies. That's why I didn't ask before. He exhales slowly, forcing himself not to react too fast. What changed? I did, she says. Last night made it clear that control isn't something I can preserve by pretending I don't need help. Silence stretches between them, thick with implication. And, he asks, and I needed to decide whether to accept dependence, she continues, or keep risking collapse by managing alone. He closes his eyes briefly. You could have made that decision without involving me. No, she says, I couldn't. The honesty in it strips away any easy response. Where are you now? He asks. Same room. I'm coming, he says. She doesn't thank him. She doesn't try to stop him. I'll see you soon, she says instead. The line goes dead. He moves through the apartment quickly, efficiently, makes breakfast for his son, leaves a note. Coordinates a ride. Every action is deliberate now, constrained by the awareness that his choices have limits. He is choosing to come, and choosing means not pretending otherwise. At the hospital, the air feels different again, tighter, less forgiving. When he enters the room, she looks at him immediately. You came, she says. Yes. She studies him closely. You didn't hesitate. No. That cost you, she says. Yes. She nods once, absorbing it. Her face looks paler than yesterday. Her posture is rigid, held together by effort rather than strength. I delayed the transfer, she says again, because moving today increases risk. And staying doesn't? It does, she replies, just differently. He pulls the chair closer and sits. So what's the decision? She meets his gaze steadily. I'm asking you to stay involved. The words are careful, precise, not constantly, she adds, not recklessly, but intentionally. He feels the weight of it settle into his chest. That limits my freedom, he says. Yes. And exposes you, he adds. Yes. Neither of them looks away. I'm not asking for loyalty, she says, or sacrifice. What are you asking for, he asks. Shared responsibility, she replies. If you're here, you're not just observing, you're part of the system. He considers that. That's dangerous. For both of us, she agrees. The monitor hums quietly. The room holds its breath. Okay, he says. The word lands with consequence. She exhales slowly, control slipping just enough to reveal relief she doesn't bother hiding. Then we do this properly, she says. How? He asks. By being clear, she replies. When you can be here, when you can't, what decisions you're part of and which you're not. He nods. And if something goes wrong, we decide together how much it costs, she says. Trust shifts again, active now. No longer passive presence. Risk acknowledged and shared. She leans back against the pillow, fatigue showing openly. Vulnerability no longer masked. This doesn't make us anything, she says. No, he agrees. It just makes us responsible, she adds. Yes. They sit in the quiet that follows, both aware that survival has moved beyond the physical. It now lives in what they are willing to carry for themselves and for each other. The clarity doesn't make things easier. It sharpens them. Once the terms are spoken, the room feels smaller. Not because space has changed, but because there is less room to hide inside it. Every movement matters now. Every choice leaves a mark. He pulls his chair closer to the bed, but not all the way. The distance is deliberate. A boundary kept even as responsibility expands. You shouldn't have tested it like that, he says. I know, she replies. No defensiveness. No justification. Just acknowledgement. You could have destabilized yourself, he continues. Yes, and you put me in a position where saying no would have meant something, he adds. She nods. That's why it mattered. He studies her for a moment, then looks away. The window shows a slice of morning sky, pale and indifferent. You exposed yourself, he says. Yes. That's not something you do lightly. No. The monitor hums steadily. Her breathing holds even, but effort shows in the tightness around her eyes, the way she keeps her shoulders set. You're not asking me to replace anyone, he says. No. You're not asking me to override medical decisions. No. You're asking me to help you decide how much risk you carry alone. Yes. He exhales slowly. That's a different kind of dependence. It is, she agrees, and it's uncomfortable. Another nurse enters, checks vitals, makes notes. The woman answers questions clearly, efficiently. Control returns easily when the system expects it. When the nurse leaves, the room settles again. You didn't tell them why you delayed the transfer, he says. I didn't need to, she replies. They care about outcomes, not motives. And you? She meets his gaze. I care about knowing when I'm lying to myself. That lands quietly. He shifts in the chair, the plastic creaking. You're still afraid? Yes. But you're not hiding it from me. No. That's new. For both of us, she says. Time moves in measured steps now. They map the day without calling it a plan. When he'll leave. When he'll come back. Who covers his son? Which hours are non-negotiable? The hospital enforces its boundaries, but inside them, something adjusts. She asks him to read updates aloud when staff leave notes she doesn't have energy to parse. He does, without commentary. She asks him to remind her when it's time to rest. He does, without insisting. He asks her to tell him when she feels a change before it shows on the monitor. She does, without minimizing. Trust operates as function. At one point, she winces sharply, pain breaking through without warning. Her hand clenches against the sheet. He stands immediately, then stops himself, watches, waits. Do you want me to call? He asks. She breathes through it, jaw tight. Not yet. He stays still. Seconds pass. The pain recedes enough for her shoulders to lower slightly. Thank you, she says quietly. For what? For not deciding for me. He nods once. Later she says, You're quieter than before. I'm conserving, he replies. That's smart. So is asking, he says. She considers that, then nods. The power between them shifts again, not in ownership, but in coordination. She does not command. He does not default. They check in. Adjust. Share load. Late afternoon settles in. His phone buzzes with a photo from home, his son at the table, homework spread out, a note scribbled beside it. He looks at it longer than necessary. You should go, she says. I will, he replies. And you'll come back. Yes. Not because she needs reassurance, because the structure holds. She watches him stand, movements careful, measured. The fatigue is still there, but now it's managed. Bounded. This isn't romance, she says suddenly. He looks at her, surprised by the directness. I know, he replies. This is survival, she continues. And accountability. Yes, and it won't feel good most of the time. No. She nods once, satisfied. Then we're clear, she says. He leaves the room quietly, the door closing behind him with less resistance than before. For the first time, neither of them feels alone in the risk. He returns after dinner. Not late, not early, exactly when he said he would. The timing matters now. It is part of what they've agreed to without signing anything. The nurse at the desk checks his name, then waves him through without comment. The system has adjusted again, not because it trusts him, but because it recognizes consistency. Inside the room, she is awake. Her posture is different, less rigid, not relaxed, but no longer braced for collapse. She looks at him when he enters. then looks away again, as if the confirmation is enough. "You ate," she says. "Yes." "You slept." "Some." She nods. "Good." The exchange is simple, practical, the kind of accounting that replaces reassurance. He sits. The chair creaks softly. His body protests less tonight. Still tired, but no longer fraying. They move through the evening in quiet coordination. A nurse comes in, adjusts medication, leaves instructions. He listens. She listens. When the nurse leaves, she asks him to repeat one detail she missed. He does. No interpretation. No emphasis. Later, she asks him to hand her the phone when a call comes in. He steps back far enough not to hear. When she finishes, she hands it back without explanation. He doesn't ask. Trust remains procedural. At one point, her breathing tightens again. Not a setback, a warning. She notices it before he does this time. "It's changing," she says. He looks at the monitor. The numbers haven't moved yet. "Call or wait?" he asks. She closes her eyes briefly, checks in with herself. "Wait." He nods. "I'm here." She breathes through it, measured and slow. He stays still, anchoring without intrusion. The moment passes. She exhales, shoulders easing. "You didn't take over," she says. "No. You didn't disappear either." "No." She looks at him then. Direct. Clear. "That's what I needed," she says. "Not thanks." Confirmation. The room settles again. Later, as the night deepens, she speaks without looking at him. "You understand what this cost you," she says. "Yes, and you're still choosing it." "Yes." "That doesn't make you noble," she adds. "It makes you accountable." He considers that. "I can live with that." She nods once. The power between them no longer shifts in sudden movements. It distributes. She holds what she can. He carries what he's agreed to. Neither pretends the balance is equal. Before he leaves for the night, he stands and pauses beside the chair. "I'll be back in the morning," he says. She meets his gaze. "If you can." "Yes." "And if you can't, I'll say so." She accepts that without comment. "That's enough," she says. He leaves quietly. In the hallway, he feels the weight of what they've done settle fully. There is no illusion left. No accidental involvement. He has limited his freedom deliberately. She has exposed herself to reliance she can't retract. Survival is no longer about getting through the night. It is about sustaining what they have chosen together, and that, he knows, will demand more than either of them has given yet. The danger does not leave. It loosens its grip, just enough to make everything harder to measure. The monitor settles into a rhythm that looks convincing if you don't stare at it too long. Numbers stay within ranges that satisfy staff. Alarms stay silent. Words like improving and responding begin to appear in quiet conversations outside the room. But nothing feels resolved. He notices it first in her fatigue. Not the sharp exhaustion of crisis, but something deeper and heavier. The kind that doesn't lift with sleep. The kind that turns small tasks into negotiations. Sitting up costs her more now than it did during the worst moments. Concentration slips. Her eyes lose focus mid-sentence, then snap back with irritation when she realizes it. Recovery is work, and work drains. He adjusts his routine again. Shorter visits during the day. Longer ones in the evening. Phone calls taken in hallways. Meals eaten standing up. His body adapts, but slowly. The fatigue never fully clears. Scarcity shifts. It's no longer about time in the room or access to help. It's about emotional capacity, about how much patience either of them has left at the end of a day. She grows quieter, not withdrawn, guarded. She answers questions with precision, but offers less than before. The authority creeps back in small ways, correcting nurses sharply, cutting conversations short, reasserting control where she can find it. He recognizes the pattern. Old defenses resurfacing. He doesn't challenge it. He works around it, keeps his presence steady. Predictable, useful, but endurance wears differently than crisis. One afternoon, she snaps at him over nothing. He's adjusting the tray, moving it closer so she doesn't have to reach. He's done it the same way for days. That's not where it goes, she says sharply. He stills. It's closer. I didn't ask for closer, she replies. Her voice is tight, irritated, tired. He pauses, then slides the tray back to where it was. Okay. The word lands flat. She exhales hard, then looks away. Silence fills the room, brittle and uncomfortable. Minutes pass. Neither of them speaks. The fatigue makes everything heavier. Small misunderstandings feel larger. Each of them carries doubt. They don't voice. For him, it's practical. How long can he keep this up? What happens if his son gets sick? If work stops pretending to wait? For her, it's control. How much of herself she's already given up. How exposed she feels relying on someone who can leave. The danger hasn't ended. It's changed shape. That night, she pushes herself too hard. She insists on sitting up longer than advised, refuses to rest when her breathing tightens. The monitor flickers with small warnings she pretends not to see. You should lie back, he says quietly. I'm fine, she replies, clipped. You're not. She turns her head toward him, eyes sharp. Don't. The word is familiar. It lands with the old authority behind it. He hesitates. That hesitation costs them. Her breathing stutters. Her shoulders tense. The numbers dip not enough for alarms, but enough to matter. He moves immediately now. Adjusts the bed. Calls for a nurse. She looks at him, anger and fear tangled together. I said don't. I know, he replies, and I couldn't wait. The nurse arrives quickly this time, makes adjustments, advises rest, leaves. The room settles again, but something has cracked. She turns her face away from him. Her jaw is tight. The vulnerability she'd allowed closes back up. You overstepped, she says. He stays calm. You were slipping. That wasn't your call. It was, he says quietly, because you didn't make it. Silence drops hard between them. This is the near failure. Not dramatic, not explosive, just two exhausted people reaching the edge of what they can manage without hurting each other. She says nothing more. He doesn't push. Endurance means staying even when progress feels invisible. He sits back down, watches the monitor, gives her space without leaving. The danger has slowed, but it hasn't stopped. And the cost of carrying each other through it is starting to show. The silence lasts longer than either of them expects. Not the calm kind. The strained kind that settles into the corners of the room and makes every sound feel intrusive. The monitor hums. The IV drips. Footsteps pass in the hallway and move on. She keeps her face turned toward the window. He stays where he is. Endurance is not active right now. It's restraint. He doesn't justify himself. Doesn't soften what he said. He knows better than to try to win an argument born of exhaustion. He also knows leaving would turn this into something worse. Minutes pass. Her breathing steadies, but the tension doesn't ease with it. She lies rigid, shoulders held too tight, as if relaxing would be an admission she's not ready to make. You don't get to decide when I lose control, she says finally. Her voice is quiet, flat, more dangerous than anger. He nods once. I didn't decide. I reacted. That's the same thing, she replies. No, he says. It isn't. She turns her head toward him sharply. The movement costs her. She hides it poorly. Her eyes are bright with fatigue and irritation. Explain, she says. He considers his words carefully, not because he wants to persuade her, but because precision matters now. When you told me not to, he says, I listened. When your body started failing anyway, I stopped listening. Her jaw tightens. That's not shared responsibility, she says. That's you overriding me. He meets her gaze steadily. It's me not letting you collapse quietly. The words hang between them, heavy and unresolved. She looks away again. Her fingers curl into the sheet, knuckles whitening. The authority she uses to control rooms and people does nothing here. Her body doesn't respond to it. That's what scares me, she says after a moment. That I don't know when I'm not reliable anymore. He hears the truth in it, the fear beneath the anger. That scares me too, he replies. She exhales sharply. You're not supposed to be afraid here. I am, he says, just not of you. That slows her. She closes her eyes briefly, then opens them again. Her expression shifts, the anger draining into something heavier. Doubt. Weariness. I don't want to become dependent, she says. You already are, he replies gently. The question is whether we pretend otherwise. The room absorbs that. The tea presses in harder now. The kind that makes people reach for old defenses because they don't have the energy to build new ones. She leans into hers. You're projecting, she says. This isn't about me. It's about your need to fix things. He doesn't flinch. Sometimes. And this, she continues, gesturing weakly at herself, isn't something you can fix. No, he agrees. It isn't. Her eyes narrow. Then why stay? The question is sharp, loaded. It cuts close to the doubts he's been carrying silently. Because leaving doesn't make it better, he says. And because staying doesn't mean fixing. It means enduring. She studies him again. Longer this time. The fatigue strips away the ability to posture. Endurance isn't neutral, she says. It takes sides. Yes, he replies. It takes effort. The nurse returns briefly to check vitals. The numbers hold. Barely. She leaves with a quiet nod, satisfied enough for now. When the door closes, the room feels smaller again. She sighs and sinks back into the pillow, finally allowing herself to rest against it. Her shoulders drop. Her breathing deepens slightly. I don't have the energy to fight you today, she says. I'm not fighting, he replies. She glances at him. You are. Just quietly. He considers that. Maybe. Another stretch of silence follows. This one softer. Still strained, but less brittle. I thought recovery would feel like progress, she says eventually. He nods. Most people do. And instead it feels like erosion, she adds. Like everything is slowly wearing down. Yes, he says. That's usually how it goes. She closes her eyes again. I hate this phase. I know. Crisis was simpler. It always is. The truth of that sits between them. Crisis demands action. Recovery demands patience. Patience exposes doubt. She shifts slightly, then stops when fatigue flares again. Her breath catches. He watches, ready, but does not move. I don't trust myself right now, she says quietly. I know. And I don't fully trust you, she adds. He nods once. That's fair. But I trust the pattern, she continues. You staying. You not pushing unless you have to. That's all I can offer, he says. She opens her eyes and looks at him again. There is no authority left in her expression. Just assessment and fatigue. That might have to be enough, she says. He sits back, muscles aching, eyes burning, and lets the moment settle. Endurance is not about feeling aligned. It's about choosing not to leave when alignment fails. They come close to failing each other tonight, but they don't. Not yet. Morning arrives without relief. The light creeps into the room slowly, dull and gray, settling over everything like residue. The night has taken more out of both of them than either is willing to admit. She wakes with a sharp intake of breath, as if pulled back into consciousness by effort alone. Her eyes open, unfocused for a second, then find him. You're still here, she says. Yes. The word sounds heavier now, like it's been used too many times without rest. She shifts, wincing before she can stop herself. The movement cost her more than yesterday. Recovery has stalled, not reversed, just stuck. A nurse enters soon after. Checks vitals. Mentions labs that aren't where they want them yet. Says they'll wait and see. The phrase lands like a sentence rather than a plan. When the nurse leaves, she stares at the ceiling again. They keep saying that, she says. Yes. It doesn't mean anything. No. She swallows. Her throat works harder than it should. Do you ever feel like you're just maintaining damage? She asks. He considers that. Yes, that there's no forward motion, she continues. Just effort to not slip backward. Yes, the honesty is quiet, uncomforting, necessary. The morning drags. She struggles with small things now. Holding her phone, following conversations, staying present long enough to finish a thought. Each failure frustrates her more than the physical pain ever did. He adjusts, slows the pace, repeats information without emphasis, gives her time without drawing attention to it. She notices anyway. I'm not stupid, she snaps at one point, when he repeats a detail she's already heard. I know, he replies calmly. Then stop treating me like I am. He nods once. Okay. He stops repeating. 10 minutes later, she asks him the same question again. He answers without comment. The fatigue is stripping away pride in uneven layers. Later, she tries to get out of bed on her own. He sees the intention in the way she shifts her weight, the set of her jaw. He stands immediately. You shouldn't. I can, she says, already pushing herself upright. She gets halfway there before her strength gives out. Her breathing stutters. Her balance falters. He steps in then, catches the rail, steadies the bed, does not touch her unless necessary. She sinks back down, furious, ashamed, exposed. I hate this, she says through clenched teeth. I know. You're watching me fail. She adds. Yes, he says, and stay. She closes her eyes hard. Tears threaten. She swallows them back. The near failure hangs heavy again. Not of health, of trust. You could leave, she says. Yes. You're choosing not to. Yes. Even when I make it harder. Yes. Her breathing steadies slowly. She opens her eyes again, exhausted. That doesn't feel like strength, she says. No, he replies. It feels like endurance. The word sits with her. The afternoon brings no breakthroughs, just maintenance, adjustments, waiting. The emotional scarcity deepens. Patience runs thin. Doubt resurfaces in quiet ways. Each of them retreats behind old habits when overwhelmed. She becomes sharper, more controlled. He becomes quieter, more contained. They pass hours like this, parallel but strained. Then, late in the day, she reaches for the call button and stops herself. Can you? She starts, then stops. The hesitation matters. Can you sit closer? She finishes. He does, without comment. She exhales slowly, tension easing a fraction. I don't know how long this takes, she says. Neither do I. And I don't know if I'll be the same when it's over. He considers that. Most people aren't. She nods, accepting the truth without comfort. The day ends the way it began, without resolution, without collapse. Just two exhausted people choosing not to leave, even as doubt presses in from all sides. Endurance, not progress. The danger has slowed, but it hasn't let go. They hold the line anyway. The decision does not come from either of them. It arrives folded inside procedure, carried in calm voices and clipped explanations. A doctor stands at the foot of the bed, hands clasped, posture professional. A nurse waits near the door. The words are careful, neutral, final. She needs to be transferred. Not today, not eventually, now. He hears the rest as background noise. A specialized unit. Different protocols. Limited access. Fewer visitors. Necessary distance framed as safety. The system is reasserting control. She listens without interrupting. Her face is still. Composed. Authority sliding back into place because it's expected of her. She asks questions that matter. Timelines. Risks. Transport details. She does not look at him. He stands off to the side, already excluded by design. This is not his decision to weigh in on. He knows that. He keeps his mouth shut. When the doctor leaves, the room feels abruptly smaller. They won't let you come, she says. The statement is flat, not cruel, not apologetic. I know, he replies. They'll limit contact, she adds, strictly. Yes. She finally looks at him then. Really looks. The fatigue is still there. The vulnerability is buried deeper now, but not gone. This is what recovery looks like, she says. Systems reclaiming space. Yes. Silence settles between them, heavy with everything they are not saying. He checks his phone. A message from his son's school about an upcoming meeting. Another from work confirming reduced hours. The consequences land quietly, stacking without announcement. He pockets the phone again. When? He asks. Within the hour, she replies. He nods once. His chest feels tight, but his face stays calm. Restraint has become muscle memory. The nurses return to prepare her. Efficient. Focused. The room fills with motion that excludes him by default. Equipment checked. Paperwork reviewed. Instructions repeated. He steps back automatically, pressed closer to the wall. She watches him from the bed as they work around her. You should go, she says quietly. He doesn't answer right away. They won't wait, she adds. And this isn't something you can negotiate. I know, he says. The distance begins here, not with departure. With acceptance. When the nurses step out briefly, the room empties again. This is different, she says. Yes. This isn't choosing space, she continues. It's having it imposed. Yes. Her fingers tighten slightly against the sheet, a small tell. She notices it too and forces them to relax. What we built, she says carefully, doesn't exist in systems. No, he agrees. It exists in behavior. She studies him, measuring the weight of that. And behavior requires presence, she says. Not always, he replies. Sometimes it requires memory. The words land softly. She exhales slowly. That's not reassuring. No, he says, but it's honest. Another nurse returns, says it's time. He steps closer to the bed for the first time in hours. Still doesn't touch her. You're going to be surrounded by people, he says. Protocols. Specialists. Yes. You'll be watched constantly. Yes. And I won't be there. She nods once. The acknowledgement costs her. You didn't fail, she says suddenly. He looks at her. Neither did you. The stretcher arrives. The bed begins to move. The moment compresses. As they wheel her toward the door, she looks at him one last time. Don't disappear, she says. I won't, he replies. The door closes behind her. The hallway absorbs the sound. He stands there alone, the system complete without him. What they built now has to survive absence, and neither of them knows yet whether it will. The room empties too cleanly. It takes less than 5 minutes for the nurses to strip it of her presence. The bed is rolled out, the monitor disconnected. Fresh linens pulled tight for the next patient. It looks neutral again, as if nothing significant ever happened there. He stands in the doorway and watches the reset finish. No one speaks to him. There's no dismissal because there's no longer anything to dismiss him from. He turns and walks down the hall slowly, steps measured, posture controlled. The building hums around him, fully functional, unconcerned with what it just displaced. Outside, the air feels sharper than it should. The sky has shifted again, brighter now, falsely optimistic. He pauses near the entrance, checks his phone, then pockets it without reading anything new. Distance begins to do its work immediately. By the afternoon, he is home. His son is at the table. Homework spread out, pencil tapping in an uneven rhythm. He looks up when his father enters. Are you done at the hospital? The boy asks. For now, he replies. The answer is honest and incomplete. Dinner is quiet. Too quiet. His son watches him between bites, waiting for explanations that don't come. He doesn't push. He has learned when adults aren't ready. Later, when his son is asleep, he sits on the couch and lets the exhaustion finally land. Not the sharp kind, the hollow kind. The one that comes after holding something together for too long. He doesn't text her, not because he doesn't want to, because he doesn't know if he's allowed. The system has rules now, layers of access. Permissions. He has been relegated to the outside without anyone needing to say so. The next day confirms it. A call from a hospital is brief. Procedural. Updates delivered without nuance. She is stable. The transfer was successful. Visitation is restricted. He listens without interrupting, asks one question at the end. Can she receive messages? A pause. Then, yes, through staff. He thanks them and hangs up. Messages through staff are not presents. They are controlled contact. He writes one anyway. Keeps it short. Neutral. Grounded. I'm here. Take care of yourself. He sends it and lets the phone rest face down on the table. Hours pass. Work presses in harder now that there is no hospital to retreat to. Reduced hours become formal, a schedule adjustment that feels like a warning. He accepts it without protest. He needs the income. He needs the stability. That night, his son asks, "Are you going back?" "Not tonight," he says. "Tomorrow?" "I don't know." The boy nods, accepting uncertainty the way children do when they've had to practice it too early. The days that follow are quiet. Too quiet. Updates arrive intermittently. Always factual. Always contained. She is improving. She is responding. She is tired. She is busy. No room for subtext. No space for what they built. He adapts because that's what he does. He shows up for his son. Goes to work. Pays bills. Sleeps when he can. Keeps his phone close without checking it too often. The absence tests him differently than the crisis did. There is no action to take. No problem to solve. Just waiting. And waiting exposes what action hid. One evening, a message comes through staff. "Thank you for respecting the boundary." He reads it twice. It is not warmth, not reassurance. It is recognition under constraint. He types a response, deletes it, then types a simpler one. "I understand." Distance settles fully now. The systems have reclaimed control. What remains is whatever survives when neither of them can reach for the other. And that is still unclear. Time changes shape when contact is reduced to permission. Days pass marked only by small updates and smaller silences. He learns the rhythm quickly. Morning messages come late. Evening ones don't always come at all. When they do, they are brief, measured, written as if someone else might read them. He adjusts his expectations instead of fighting them. At work, the instability hardens into something more permanent. A meeting is scheduled. No raised voices. No threats. Just a conversation about coverage and reliability, about the need for predictability. He listens. Nods. Accepts reduced hours without protest. That night, he sits with his son on the couch, helping with homework he barely remembers how to do. The boy leans against him without comment, weight warm and familiar. The contact grounds him in a way the hospital never did. "You're here more," his son says. "Yes." "I like that," the boy adds. The statement lands quietly. He absorbs it without responding. Later, alone in the kitchen, he checks his phone again. No new messages. He doesn't send one. Distance has rules now, and he follows them. When contact does come, it's filtered through professionalism. A nurse relays that she's had a good morning. A brief note mentions she's been moved again. Another unit. Another protocol. Progress, but not access. He replies when appropriate. Neutral. Supportive. Brief. He notices the change in her tone over time. Less sharp. Less guarded. More contained. Not because she's weaker, but because the system demands it. Whatever authority she had in the first room doesn't travel easily. One afternoon, a message arrives that isn't routed through staff. Her number. They changed the rules. "I have 10 minutes. He reads it once. Then again. He calls immediately. Her voice comes through thinner than he remembers. Controlled. Tired. "I don't have much time," she says. "I know." A pause. Neither of them rushes it. "I wanted to hear your voice," she says. "That's okay," he replies. Another pause. "I'm improving," she says. Slowly. "I'm glad. They're doing what they should," she adds. "I don't need you here." The words are deliberate, carefully chosen. He hears what's underneath them. Okay, he says. And you shouldn't put things on hold waiting for me, she continues. I haven't. It's true. And not. The silence stretches. This isn't a test, she says. I know. It's just distance, she adds. And distance changes things. Yes. She exhales. I don't know what survives it. He answers honestly. Me neither. The line clicks off before either of them can say more. The call leaves him unsettled in a way the waiting never did. Not because of what was said, because of what wasn't. The consequences land quietly over the next week. He commits more fully at home, takes on extra shifts when offered, rebuilds routines that had frayed. His life regains structure, even as something else remains unresolved. Her messages grow less frequent again, more clinical, more contained. Not because she's pulling away, because she's being absorbed. The system around her is efficient, complete, sufficient, and he is no longer necessary to its function. One evening, as he tucks his son into bed, the boy asks, "Are you sad?" He considers the question. "No," he says. "I'm just adjusting." The answer is incomplete, but it's the best one he has. Later, alone, he sits in the quiet and lets the truth surface. What they built was real, but it was built under pressure. Now the pressure is gone. What remains has to stand without it. He doesn't reach out. Neither does she. The restraint is mutual. And the stakes are clear now. Not in crisis, but in consequence. If they find their way back to each other, it won't be because they needed to survive. It will be because what survived mattered enough to return. They reunite without ceremony. There is no call asking him to come, no emergency, no sudden reversal that demands speed. The message arrives in the late afternoon, routed through the same controlled channel as before. Discharge planning meeting tomorrow. Your presence requested. The wording matters. Requested. Not permitted. Not tolerated. He reads it twice, then checks the time. He adjusts his schedule at work without explanation. Picks his son up on time. Makes dinner. Leaves a note on the counter. Everything is done deliberately. Nothing rushed. The hospital looks different when he walks back in. Not because the building has changed, but because his role has. He checks in at the desk. His name is already there. A badge printed without hesitation. Directions given without warning. Systems remember patterns. The unit is quieter than the first one. Fewer alarms. More space. The air feels less brittle. When he reaches her room, the door is open. She is sitting up. Not propped. Not supported by urgency. Sitting under her own power. Shoulders squared. Posture careful but intact. Her color is better. Not strong. Present. She looks at him and nods once. You came, she says. Yes. You weren't told to rush. No. Good, she replies. He stops a few feet from the bed. The distance is intentional. It is not the old distance of caution. It is the new distance of choice. A case manager stands near the window reviewing papers. A nurse finishes an update and leaves. The room empties with purpose. When they are alone, neither of them fills the silence immediately. You look different, she says. So do you. She considers that. Different how? Standing, he says. A faint shift crosses her face, not a smile. Recognition. She gestures to the chair. He sits. This isn't a crisis, she says. No. And you're not here to steady the room. No. She watches him carefully, as if checking whether he understands what's changed. They don't need you here, she continues. Not the way they did. I know. And I don't either, she adds. The words are not a rejection. They are a boundary, stated cleanly. He nods. Okay. She exhales slowly. The control she carries is different now. Not brittle. Not defensive. Reassembled with intention. The meeting is about next steps, she says. Recovery. Logistics. Yes. They'll talk about timelines and resources. Yes. And I'll make decisions, she adds. He waits. You'll be part of some of them, she continues. Not because you're needed, because your presence changes how I decide. The weight of that lands without drama. Understood, he says. The door opens briefly. A staff member signals it's time. She gathers herself with practiced efficiency. He remains seated until she stands fully, then rises. They walk to the conference room side by side, not close, not distant, aligned by pace rather than proximity. Inside, the conversation is structured. Options presented, constraints acknowledged. No one looks at him for answers. No one excludes him either. When questions arise that touch home life, she turns to him without prompting. Can you do mornings? She asks. Yes. Evenings, some. She nods and adjusts the plan accordingly. No explanation, no justification. Past choices echo quietly in the room. The nights he stayed, the mornings he left, the distance that followed. None of it is spoken. The meeting ends. Papers are signed, timeline set. The system closes the loop. Outside the room, she pauses. This is where it changes, she says. Yes, there won't be urgency to hide behind. I know. And no role that defines you by necessity. Yes. She studies him for a long moment. The authority she carries now is steadier, grounded in acceptance rather than control. You don't owe me anything, she says. He meets her gaze. I'm not here because I owe you. A pause. And you're not here because you need me, she adds. No. The acknowledgement settles between them. Clean. Honest. She turns back toward her room. He walks with her, then stops at the door. I'll come by after work, he says, if that still makes sense. She considers it. It does, not as a request, as alignment. He nods once and steps back. The bond holds, not because it's needed to survive, but because it fits the life that remains. He comes back that evening without urgency. No alarms, no texts asking where he is. He finishes his shift, picks up his son, eats dinner with him, listens to a long explanation about a school project that matters more than it should. When he leaves the apartment again, it's because the day has space for it, not because something is breaking. The hospital feels quieter at night now. Not empty, settled. Her room doors closed when he arrives. He waits without knocking, hands in his pockets, posture loose. The waiting feels different too. Less sharp, less loaded. When the door opens, it's her. She's standing on her own, one hand on the frame for balance. No nurse in sight. The IV pole is gone. A portable monitor clips quietly at her side. You're early, she says. Traffic was light. She steps aside to let him in. The room looks less like a command center now. Fewer machines. Fewer reminders of failure. A chair sits by the window instead of beside the bed. She closes the door behind him. You didn't rush, she says. No. And you still came. Yes. She nods, as if confirming a variable in a larger equation. Sit. He takes the chair by the window. She takes the bed, lowering herself carefully, managing the movement with visible discipline. Recovery has taught her caution without softness. They sit in parallel silence for a while. Outside, the city hums. Inside, the air is steady. You didn't ask how I am, she says eventually. You look like you're managing, he replies. I am, she agrees. That wasn't the answer. He considers it. How are you? She thinks before responding. Tired, clear, still adjusting. He nods. That matches what he sees. The plan is conservative, she continues. Slower than I'd like. Good, he says. She looks at him sharply. Why? Because speed got you here. The words are not sharp. They are not corrective. They are simple. She absorbs them without reaction. They're sending me home soon, she says. Yes. Not to work, she adds. To rest. Yes. That will be difficult. Yes. Another quiet acknowledgement. She shifts slightly, then settles. The movement is controlled. The vulnerability remains, but it's contained now, not raw. You won't be there every day, she says. No. You won't reorganize your life around my recovery. No. And if something goes wrong, she continues, you won't assume responsibility. He meets her gaze. I won't disappear either. She studies him. The authority she carries now is not about command. It's about alignment. That's the balance, she says. Yes. She reaches for a folder on the table beside her, slides it toward him without ceremony. What's this? He asks. Adjusted timelines, she replies. Contingencies. He opens it. Skims. Skims. Recognizes patterns. Schedules that respect his limits without highlighting them. Decisions that account for his presence without depending on it. You didn't have to do this, he says. I did, she replies, because past choices echo. He looks up at her. She meets his gaze steadily. I don't forget who paid what, she continues, even when the debt is unspoken. He closes the folder and slides it back. I'm not keeping score. She nods. Neither am I. The statement is deliberate. Outside the room, footsteps pass. A cart rolls by. Life continues. You don't look relieved, she says. I'm not, he replies. I'm settled. That earns a small pause from her. That's better, she says. They sit in silence again, not strained this time. Just present. Before he leaves, she stands again, steadier than before. She walks him to the door herself. This isn't rescue, she says. No. And it's not obligation. No. She opens the door. It's continuity. He nods once. That's enough. He leaves without looking back. Behind him, she closes the door and leans briefly against it. Not from weakness, but from recognition. What they built has changed shape. It no longer needs crisis to hold. The weeks that follow do not rush toward resolution. They settle. He doesn't come every day. He comes when it makes sense. After work, after dinner, sometimes only once in a week. The rhythm is deliberate, not reactive. It leaves room for his son, for work, for sleep that actually restores something. She notices, not because she's counting absences, but because she's counting how things hold when he isn't there. At home, she moves carefully through her days. Recovery is slow. It resists ambition. She follows the plan even when it frustrates her. She rests when she wants to act. She lets the system do what it was built to do. When they talk, it's never long. No updates delivered with urgency. No reassurances demanded. They exchange information the way people do when they trust the other person to handle it responsibly. One evening, he arrives later than usual. She's standing at the counter in her kitchen, one hand braced against the surface, the other holding a glass of water. The apartment is quiet, clean, controlled. You didn't have to come, she says when she sees him. I wanted to, he replies. She nods and turns back to the glass. He waits until she finishes and sets it down before stepping closer, not to help, just to be there if needed. You're managing, he says. Yes, and you don't need me here to do it. No. She looks at him then. Really looks. But you still came. Yes. She considers that, then gestures toward the chair at the table. He sits. She takes the opposite one, lowering herself slowly, carefully. They sit across from each other, the space between them uncharged, but intentional. This is what it looks like now, she says. Not intensity, not proximity, just choice. Yes. And if this stops working, she adds, we say so. Yes. No drama. No conditions. Past choices echo quietly in moments like this. The nights he stayed. The mornings he left. The distance that followed. None of it is erased. All of it informs how they move now. He stands to leave an hour later, not because he's needed elsewhere urgently, but because the visit has run its course. I'll see you next week, he says. She nods. If nothing changes. If nothing changes, he agrees. At the door, she pauses. You didn't save me, she says. He meets her gaze. You didn't need saving. And you didn't lose yourself, she adds. Not completely, he replies. That earns a quiet acknowledgement. He leaves without ceremony. She closes the door behind him and stands there for a moment longer than necessary, breathing evenly, steady on her feet. Authority and survival have been redefined, not as dominance or dependence, as shared responsibility that respects distance as much as presence. What comes next will not be tested by crisis, it will be tested by time, and for the first time, neither of them feels the need to rush toward it. The wedding does not happen quickly, that matters. There is no rush to make meaning official, no announcement that reframes what they survived as destiny. Time passes first quiet, unremarkable time, the kind that tests whether something holds when no one is watching it. She recovers in stages, not the cinematic kind, the practical kind, physical therapy appointments scheduled early in the morning, fatigue that arrives without warning, days when she cancels plans because her body decides before she does. Her authority returns slowly, reshaped. She goes back to work part-time, then pulls back again when it costs too much. Learns the difference between command and capacity. Delegates more than she ever did before. Keeps fewer hours. Makes decisions with margins instead of bravado. He watches from a distance that is no longer imposed. He does not hover. He does not rescue. He shows up when he says he will, and leaves when it makes sense. He picks up his son from school every day now. Keeps his job steady. Lets some ambitions go without naming them as sacrifice. Survival has reorganized him. They see each other in ordinary spaces, grocery store aisles, park benches, a quiet kitchen late in the evening when his son is asleep and she is leaning against the counter, steady but still careful. No grand declarations follow. Instead, there are adjustments. He learns her limits without her having to state them. She learns his without testing them. They negotiate time the way people do when they understand cost. Not everything is shared. Not everything needs to be. The bond deepens without spectacle. There are failures, a missed dinner, a sharp word spoken when neither of them has energy left, an argument that isn't dramatic, but cuts deeper because it touches old fears. His fear of neglecting his child again, her fear of becoming dependent without noticing. They stop before it escalates. That's new for both of them. They sit in the aftermath instead of trying to win it. Let the tension cool. Return to the conversation when they can speak without defending themselves. Endurance has taught them restraint. Months pass. Her health stabilizes into something predictable. Though never effortless, his life settles into a rhythm that no longer requires constant recalibration. The systems that once excluded him now treat him as expected presence, not exception. One evening, they sit at the small table in his apartment. His son is doing homework in the next room, humming softly to himself. The sound grounds everything. She looks around the space, the worn couch, the stack of mail on the counter, the ordinary life that continued even when she was absent from it. "This is where I first saw you hesitate," she says. He looks up. "When?" "In the hospital," she replies. "When staying meant leaving something else undone." He nods. "I didn't know how to choose yet." "And now?" she asks. He considers it. "Now I choose knowing it costs something." She absorbs that quietly. The question of marriage doesn't arrive as a proposal. It emerges as logistics. "What happens if I get sick again?" she asks one night, not dramatically, just directly. He answers honestly. "We adapt. We don't pretend it's nothing." "And if my work demands more than I can give?" she continues. "Then you give less," he says, "and live with it." "And if your son needs you in a way that pushes everything else out?" she asks. "Then he comes first," he says without hesitation. She watches him closely. "That doesn't leave much room for romance," she says. He doesn't smile. "It leaves room for commitment." The word lands without ceremony. They don't decide everything at once. They decide in parts. Shared insurance. A will updated quietly. Conversations with his son that are careful and honest. No promises made on his behalf. No pressure applied. The boy accepts her presence the way children do when they feel safe without question, but with attention. He notices how she moves carefully, how she listens, how she never competes for his father's focus. Trust builds there too, unannounced. The wedding itself is small. A courthouse. 2 witnesses. No speeches. She wears something simple. He wears what he already owns. His son stands between them, holding both of their hands without understanding the symbolism, only the closeness. There is no kiss framed as triumph, no sense that something has been conquered. When they sign the papers, it feels less like arrival and more like acknowledgement. They are already living the consequences. Marriage does not change their bond, it names it. Afterward, they go home. Order takeout. Sit on the couch. His son falls asleep halfway through a movie. She rests her head back carefully, managing her energy the way she always does now. He adjusts the blanket without thinking. Nothing is solved forever, but everything that mattered has been faced. Survival did not make them extraordinary. It made them precise. It stripped away fantasy and left behind something sturdier. What remains is not a victory. It is a continuation. Marriage changes very little. That surprises people more than anything else. The mornings look the same. He wakes first out of habit, not obligation. Makes coffee. Packs a lunch for his son. She moves more slowly, still careful with her energy, still measuring what the day will allow. Some days she joins them at the table. Some days she doesn't. No one keeps score. The apartment adjusts. Her things appear gradually. A coat by the door. Shoes lined neatly beside his. A folder of medical documents placed where she can reach them without bending. Nothing announced. Everything deliberate. He notices the quiet competence of it. She notices the way he makes space without being asked. Work remains work. She returns in phases, choosing influence over presence. She stops staying late, stops proving endurance through hours logged. Delegates decisions she once would have hoarded. Some people push back. She lets them. Authority, she's learned, doesn't come from exhaustion. He keeps his job stable, turns down opportunities that would demand unpredictability. It costs him advancement. It buys him time. He doesn't frame it as sacrifice because that would poison it. Their arguments are restrained, not because they don't disagree, but because they know where the fault lines are. When tension rises, it's familiar territory now: fatigue, fear of slipping backward, fear of being needed too much or not enough. Once, late at night, after his son is asleep, she says, "If this ever stops working, we don't pretend it isn't." He nods. "We won't. And we don't use the past to trap each other," she adds. "No," he agrees. "We use it to notice patterns." That's the contract they actually live by. Her health has setbacks. Nothing dramatic. A bad week. A procedure that takes more out of her than expected. He rearranges schedules, calls in favors, cancels plans without resentment. She watches closely, aware of the balance they've struck. "You can say no," she reminds him once. "I know," he says. "Today, I'm saying yes." She accepts it without relief or guilt. His son adapts in his own quiet way. He starts asking her questions about her work, about why she rests when she does, about why some days she leaves early and some days she doesn't go in at all. She answers honestly, never simplifying herself into something easier to accept. One afternoon, when she's moving slowly and clearly tired, the boy brings her a glass of water without being asked. She looks at him for a long moment, then thanks him carefully as if the moment deserves respect. Later, she says to his father, "I won't fail him." He answers without hesitation, "You don't have to be perfect to not fail." Time keeps doing what it does. They grow older in small, visible ways. Lines deepen. Hair grays. The urgency that once defined them fades into something steadier. Sometimes, when things are quiet, he thinks about the hospital room, about how narrow everything was then, how every decision felt like a test with immediate consequences. Now the consequences stretch out longer, less obvious, but no less real. One evening, they sit on the balcony, watching the city settle into night. She leans back in the chair, careful but relaxed. He sits beside her, legs stretched out, phone face down on the table. "This life would have terrified me before," she says. "Why?" he asks. "Because it's constrained," she replies. "It has limits." He nods. "It still does." She looks at him. That's what makes it livable. There is no music swelling, no sense of completion. Just two people who survived something that forced them to see each other without armor, and chose to continue without putting it back on. Later inside, he turns off the lights while she locks the door. They move around each other with the ease of people who have learned how not to collide. When they go to bed, there is no dramatic closeness, just shared space, shared weight, shared understanding of what tomorrow might ask. Survival changed them, not into heroes, into people who know how much things cost and decide carefully what they're willing to pay. The story does not end, it settles. And that, for both of them, is enough. Years later, the hospital becomes just a building again. They pass it sometimes on the way somewhere else. A routine checkup. A meeting across town. The windows still reflect the same light. The doors still open and close with the same indifference. They don't stop. What mattered there has already been carried forward. His son grows older, taller, more opinionated. He learns what it means to share space with someone who listens more than she speaks, who never tries to replace anything, who earns authority through consistency rather than volume. One evening, when the boy is older than he should be to ask this, he says, "You didn't meet her like normal people meet." "No," his father agrees. "Was that hard?" "Yes." "Was it worth it?" He considers the question carefully. It's still ongoing. The boy accepts that answer. He's grown up around truths that don't resolve cleanly. Her health remains a presence in their lives, not a threat, but a consideration. There are appointments marked on calendars, medications refilled without comment, days when she rests more than planned, and days when she does more than advised and pays for it later. They adjust. Always adjusting. Authority for her becomes quieter over time. She no longer needs to assert it constantly. People still listen. Decisions still land. But she no longer measures herself by how much she can endure alone. For him, calm deepens into something steadier. He no longer mistakes endurance for obligation. He chooses where to spend himself with more care. He leaves work on time. He shows up when it matters. He misses fewer things that cannot be repeated. Their marriage is visible only in details. Shared glances during difficult conversations, a hand placed on the back of a chair to steady her without comment. His quiet refusal to overschedule their lives, her insistence that his son's needs are never negotiated away. They do not talk often about how it started. When they do, it's brief. "I was afraid of losing control," she says once, years later. "I was afraid of leaving," he replies. They sit with that. It explains enough. There is no moment where they declare they are happy. Happiness is not the metric they use. Instead, there is stability, honesty, the ability to say when something is too much, the trust that the other person will listen without trying to fix it immediately. One night, after the apartment is quiet and the city has slowed, she says, "If that door hadn't opened." He stops her gently. Not with words. With a look that says the speculation isn't useful. "We didn't marry a moment," he says. "We married the continuation." She nods. That matters. The world keeps moving. Their lives remain ordinary in the best sense of the word. No rescues, no collapses, just the steady work of choosing each other with eyes open. Survival did not bind them, it introduced them. What followed was choice, repeated over time with full awareness of consequence. That is what remains. Not a victory, not a miracle, a life that holds because it was built to. And they continue.